everybody. Today we're debating whether or not evolution undermines Christianity, and we're starting right now. Ladies and gentlemen, thrilled to have you here for another epic debate. This is going to be a lot of fun. A very calm, civilized discussion, we promise. So, this is going to be a lot of fun. We have Mark Drysdale, animal specialist, returning, as well as Dr. Denis Lamoureux joining us tonight for a discussion on, I had originally put it as, does evolution disprove Christianity? But I have to be honest, on Twitter, people were like, of course not. And so I was like, okay, well, how about we'll put it as we originally talked about it over email. Does evolution undermine Christianity? Would you think that maybe? I don't know. We'll see what you think after this discussion. So, want to remind you, first, if this is your first time here, consider hitting that subscribe button, as we've got a lot more debates and discussions coming up on questions just like this, as well as want to let you know our speakers, who we're very honored to have their links in the description. So if you're listening and you're like, I like that, I want to hear more, well, you can conveniently find those links down in the description. Also, we have 10-minute flexible opening statements, so if they need a little bit more or a little bit less, that's up to the speakers, and then we'll go into that open conversation for about 45 minutes or so, followed by Q&A. So if you have a question, fire that question into the live chat, and then I'll pull that question out. We'll ask as many as we can at the end. Super chats are also an option. So if you do have a super chat or a question that you want to have two sent to the top of the list, as well as if you want to make a comment toward one of the speakers that they would get to respond to, you can also do a super chat. And, of course, as you are hopefully going to be your polite selves, as you usually are, we just ask that you would be as kind as you can to the speakers, as we're honored to have them. And so I feel like I personally owe them, because there are all sorts of channels they could go on, but they're spending their time with us tonight. So we appreciate them hanging out with us. And with that, if I recall right, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, is it your first statement that you're going to do, followed by Denis, or was it flip-flopped?
Yeah, let's flip-flop. Let's let Denis go first.
All right.
You bet. So Denis is jumping into share screen mode. I'll pull up his slides. So as of right now, you are seeing Denis's slide presentation.
Okay, do you see the title there?
Absolutely.
Does evolution undermine Christianity?
Perfect. Well, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. It's my second time, and in the course of things, I got to know Mark, and Mark, I think, is an absolutely wonderful guy, and we have some differences, but I think we're going to have a fruitful exchange. So the title, Does Evolution Undermine Christianity? I think one of the questions you have to ask is, what exactly is Christianity? And for me, it's about Jesus. And whether God created through an evolutionary process or not, I think is absolutely immaterial, because Christianity is about Jesus. And I'm a Christian. I'm an evangelical Christian. Jesus is my Lord and Savior. Now, with that being said, a lot of people will disagree with me. And part of the problem is there's not just one view of origins when it comes to Christians, but many of them. No doubt about it, people are aware of young earth creation, the belief that the world was created 6,000 years ago over 6 days. And I would say that continues to be a dominant position. There's another position called progressive creation. Some people call it old earth creation. Belief the earth is very, very old, but that God created animals at different times along the way across millions and millions of years. Then finally, and this is a fairly new position, though some people used to call it theistic evolution, evolutionary creation. This is the belief that God created through an evolutionary process. So let me give you a quick definition on this term. And the thing to point out, evolutionary creationists like myself are first and foremost creationists. And this is the belief that God created the universe and living organisms through, and number one, ordained. That is, he planned it, he ordered it. Sustained. This is not a God who winds the clock of the universe and runs away. He's the one who upholds every particle throughout the universe, and an intelligently designed evolutionary process. And of course, this term intelligent design always raises a lot of eyebrows because there's a lot of debate on it. Here's how I'm going to define it. This is the belief that the beauty, complexity, and functionality of nature points to some sort of mind. Not specifically the Christian God, but it could certainly include the Christian God. All right, with that being said, I need a couple terms to help clarify this discussion. The words teleology and dysteleology. Now, teleology simply means plan and purpose. I'm a teleologist. I believe that's plan and purpose, and this plan and purpose is rooted in the God of Christianity. Dysteleology, this is no plan and purpose, a universe with no plan and purpose. Richard Dawkins, the famous atheist, would be your classic dysteleologist. Now, the word evolution, and let's call this what it is. It's a scientific theory. It makes no reference to God, makes no reference to intelligent design. It's just a natural process whereby all living organisms arose through natural processes. Watch my finger, period. Deal with the physical. And the word creation, if you ask me as a theologian, it's a very simple definition. Belief in a creator and everything around us is a product of that creator. Doctrine of creation, a religious belief, does not deal with how, though this is why theologians need to be informed and have friends in the sciences. All right, here's the problem in the culture. Most people, the common assumption is evolution has to be dysteleological. You're getting, the churches are presenting that, I will tell you. This is also public education, both at the high school level and in public universities. And it's the assumption that evolution is necessarily atheistic, and that's all there is to it. And of course, that's the way we've been, and I'm going to use this term very cautiously, socially conditioned, because everyone is socially conditioned. Well, as a professor, I like to think outside the box. Let's try this. Could it be that evolution is teleological, has some sort of plan or purpose? And if that's the case, that would make a person evolutionist like I am. Also believe in a creator, make you a creationist, and therefore you embrace a teleological understanding of evolution. Now, for some of you folks are probably wrestling with this, and I speak to those guys in the household of faith. There's a classic argument to help you understand this, the embryology evolution analogy. And it simply goes like this, that when you were being created in your mother's womb, do you believe God came and put an arm or attached a leg? No, most people think that God created us through natural processes. In other words, embryological and developmental processes. In other words, God uses natural processes to create life, of you in particular. Well, why can't God have another set of natural processes to create all living organisms? And those processes scientists call evolutionary processes. All right, got to introduce a term here and got to get something off the table very quickly. Scientific concordism. Now, this is a term not many people are aware of it. Sometimes it's just called concordism. And this is the idea that the Bible is supposed to align somehow with the facts of nature out there. And the majority of Christians would embrace this, though they don't know the term. But let me suggest this simply does not work, and you don't have to go very far into the Bible to see the Bible has an ancient science. On the second day of creation, God creates a firmament to separate the waters above from waters below. Now you're saying, what in the heck is this all about? And I'm going to say, stop. Put yourself in the ancient world. Suspend all your wonderful scientific categories. Look up, and what do you see? It's a big blue dome. So to think there's a sea of water up there makes perfect sense from an ancient phenomenological perspective. And phenomenological is a Greek term that just means appearance. So from an ancient perspective, without use of telescopes and scientific instruments, but just the naked eye, it's not a bad idea to think there's a body of water up there. Okay, fourth day of creation. And again, we're just in that first chapter of the Bible to dismiss scientific concordism very quickly. And God does what? Places the sun, moon, and stars in the firmament. And by the way, the word firmament is your best translation of the Hebrew word rakia, a hard, firm structure. It's holding up some body of water. And when it comes to the sun, moon, and stars, isn't that what it looks like from an ancient phenomenological perspective? And indeed, that's the case. Now, you'll notice when it comes to the earth, there's water all around it. It's like an island. Why do they think that? Put yourself in the ancient Near East, travel in all directions, and what do? You hit water. So this is where we do some archaeology, and this is the Babylonian world map. And you'll see what you have is a circular earth with a circumferential sea all around. This makes perfect sense in the ancient world. So let's go move back to this first chapter of the Bible. Again, we're wondering, does the Bible reveal scientific facts? And the Bible starts in the beginning. God created the heavens, the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. And what you see in your first 3 days, it matches up and solves the formlessness problem. And the next 3 days solves the emptiness problem. So day 1, separation of light from darkness. Day 2, separation of waters above from waters below. Day 3, dry land. Now, take a look what happens when we start filling the universe. You have the sun, moon, and stars. Why are they there? because they're lining up. This is why we call these parallel panels. They align up with light. When it comes to sea creatures and flying creatures, why are they on day 5? Well, first, flying creatures, the airspace and defined body of water for sea creatures, and then finally land animals and humans and dry land. When you look at this and you see this ancient science, it becomes very clear that scientific concordism fails. It just doesn't work. Okay, many religious people will say, what do you do with this? And there's a very simple principle, and it's this: the message, incident, principle. And if you ask any religious person, why do you read scripture? They will tell you it's for messages, spiritual truths. And I like to call these inerrant because they're absolutely true. And in order to deliver these, God descended to the level of ancient people and allowed them to use their incidental ancient science, which was from a phenomenological perspective. So in other words, this is a vessel to deliver these great ideas. Now, could God have put someone in a trance and say, I created through Big Bang cosmology and evolutionary biology? God could have done that, but here's the thing. Do you think God would do that? Ancient people would have never understood that. Okay, scientific concordism, the Bible is a book of science, is off the table. This is where I think Mark and I will have a pretty good discussion. And this is a philosophical approach to how I relate science and religion. You'll see here the term metaphysics. Meta in Greek means beyond, and physis, physics, from which we get the word physical. These are ideas beyond the physical. In other words, these are religious and philosophical ultimate beliefs. And when it comes to science, well, everyone has a pretty good idea on that. It's about observations, experiments, from which we get theories and laws. This is science. And what you see here is a reciprocal relationship. So first I walk into the lab, I get some scientific data, and I ask the larger question: what do I make about all this beauty, complexity, and functionality? Well, I take a step of faith, and everyone needs to take a step of faith, because there's no mathematical formula to go from our physics and our science to our ultimate beliefs, our metaphysics. Now, whether it comes quickly through intuition or a more slow process through reason, it works. It's a variety of different approaches and changes from person to person. But here's the bottom line: everyone needs to take a step of faith from their science to the metaphysics. And if you don't like the faith word, then you could simply say taking an intellectual step or an intellectual jump. Now, you'll notice there's arrows going down. This is a little more subtle. And here's the bottom line: we are all socially conditioned into a certain metaphysical belief system. In other words, we're given a set of glasses from our education, our families, and we view nature through those metaphysical views. So I, as a Christian who believes in intelligent design, I'll be the first person to admit it, that when I go into the lab, I certainly see more design in nature, and I get blessed by it completely. All right, question becomes, and this is for Mark: what goes on in that reciprocal step of faith or reciprocal intellectual jump? It's an epistemological challenge. And epistemology simply means theory of knowledge. And everyone has epistemological categories, though they may not know the term epistemology. Here are some foundational ones that I think everyone agrees upon. Correspondence, that knowledge matches external reality. Coherence, that everything's internally consistent without contradictions. And consilience, knowledge interconnects into one grand plan. Why am I an evolutionist? Is because when you put together all the scientific data from all the different historical sciences, it fits together as a grand plan. Now, if you want to limit your theory of knowledge to these categories, you can, but I am going to take a step forward and ask the following question: are there religious epistemological categories? And let me give you some examples. Number one, the divine foundation of knowledge. Is knowledge ultimately rooted in God? Or is knowledge ultimately a function of our brain? And I'm going to use a dysteleological understanding of the origin of brain that's been built through fighting, fleeing, feeding, and fertilizing. In other words, your brain was never built for philosophizing. Why should you trust your brain? Another religious category is the notion of mystery. Are we to assume that we can figure everything out in the universe? Or is it that God has created us, yes, with these wonderful minds, but there are certain limits to it? And finally, and Mark should jump out of his seat when he sees this next one, but it's a challenging one: the impact of sin. Is sin real, and does sin impact the mind? Is knowledge influenced by the spiritual state of a person? For example, if someone doesn't have a relationship with God, will that influence their mind? And in particular, will that influence those reciprocal steps of faith between their beliefs, their metaphysics, and their science? Now, before you think I'm a wingnut, let me introduce you to one of the most important philosophers in the entire world. And he's not just a Christian philosopher. Yes, he's a Christian, but Alvin Plantinga is listed, and when he came to the University of Alberta in 2000, as one of the 3 most important philosophers in the world. In our philosophy department, there are projects done on him. And in 2000, and notice the publication here, Oxford University Press, chapter 7, listen to what Plantinga has as titles. Sin and its cognitive consequences, down to Roman numeral 4, the noetic effects of sin. Now, nous in Greek just means mind. So the mind effects of sin and sin and knowledge. So my point is, this is going to get pretty dicey in terms, if we're going to have a conversation, we're going to have to deal with this stuff. All right, and this is my final slide. This is actually the final slide I have in every one of my science and religion courses. As we go through the course, we remove scientific concordism. The Christians get completely convinced there's an ancient science in the Bible, so we're not going to go to the Bible. And when it comes to evolution, there is no debate. Of course, in some evangelical circles, like my Christian tradition, they claim there's a debate. But here's the deal when it comes to science. 98% of scientists accept biological evolution, including human evolution. And when it comes to the fossil record, it's very clear. And I'm using the vertebrates, where it's really easy. Fish evolved into amphibians, into reptiles, into mammals, and finally into humans. And here's the question for Mark, and between Mark and I. Is this process disteleological, the way Richard Dawkins would suggest, or is it teleological? And that's the position I would argue. Thanks for your attention. Okay, Mark, over to you, my friend.
Thanks a lot, Dennis. I really appreciate your honesty. And don't forget, you're not just a wingnut, you're a metric wingnut. You're from Canada. Don't ever forget, you're from Canada. So this will be the first debate where we get to talk on the metric system all night. All right, like I said, I don't have a big opening. I don't have the slides. Really good job. It looked really good. I've been making some comments on the chat as it goes by. Me and you, like I said, we line up about 95% of the way. We are both old world. They're not old world creationists. They are just old world. We understand that this Earth is 5.54 billion years old. We understand that the universe has been around. Well, they're actually going down a little in time here. We're down to about 12.8 billion years. We lost about 1 billion years about a year ago. And that's really interesting as well, where they found this. They just think they found the oldest star at about 12.8 billion years. Really interesting stuff going on. So really what this is going to come down to, is there any room for religion at all? Is there any gap that we can slide a God into? And that is where I always am looking for discussions with people like yourself, Kent Hovind, people like these. This is a circus show. We all know that we all join in. We all look at it and it's like, wow, that's really out there. You know, we got this going on and that going on. And I'm not here to beat up a man who can't defend himself. We're not going to do that tonight. But like I said, you know, you got your Kent Hovinds, you got your Ray Comforts, you got your Ken Hams. That and let's make it clear for the viewing audience. This is not Denis. Denis is a man who understands science. He understands it better than I do. He has a PhD in it. But let's not forget, here's the difference. I don't believe in a God. That is really the only separation between Denis and I. For the most part, all of the science lines up. He understands the what we're dealing with as far as the age. He understands genetics. He understands that once you start looking into biology, there really is no question. We've been here for this long. We're all related. I believe your opinion is we're all related, right? Do we relate back
completely
to chimpanzees? Okay, so
absolutely, they're our closest cousins, with roughly about a 1% difference. I mean, we can quibble over that, but they are the closest ones here,
to us. if you believe in all you got to do is it's very simple. Just look at retroviruses and where they've injected themselves into our DNA. It's a closed case. There's no other way this could happen unless God is just one heck of a prankster, and he likes laughing at us and giving us all kinds of mysteries that we can't figure out. But right now, everything that we see in science is pointing towards an old universe, a old evolved Earth where we had very basic life forms come around at around 500 to a billion years. We're pretty accurate on this. About 500 to 600,000 years ago, things really started to get exciting. We finally had the oxygen from all the single-celled animals, or whatever you want to call them, in the ocean, finally produced enough oxygen. You got people, the young earth creationists, say, well, how did we have animals before we had oxygen? How did we have this before that? Well, it's obvious. We didn't have oxygen, but every planet we look at has CO2. That is what plants feed off of. Plants make the oxygen. Then came along the more complex. It all actually makes really good sense. And all I'm hearing is yeses. And that's the truth. That's what I'm saying. We're really going to line up on a lot of things tonight, Dennis. The only thing that I am missing is, where do I slip a God into this? Why do I need somebody to kick this off? And where's there any proof that we've had a God? We look into a lot of the Jesus claims, and it's really, we've got a lot of evidence that Jesus never existed. Richard Carrier, who's no hero of mine, it's just someone that I follow. He's got a really good book out, and it's hard to find a Jesus now. We've got such a time span between when Jesus walked the earth, apparently, to the first writings of this. And yet Egypt was a very well documented time back in the times of Christ. There's really not a lot of talk. There's no talks of the Hebrews being enslaved in Egypt. There's just a lot of stuff missing that I don't know where I can pick and choose through. And I don't know if you're Old Testament or King James. I don't know where you fall. But when I look at the Old Testament, and I've read all of them several times, you got to go back and you've got to read them over and over to understand them. You got to read them the first time. You got to let them sink in. You got to go back. You got to let it sink in. You got to look for those things that can convince you that you're reading something that does it make sense in what we know today. And really, it's hard to find, for me anyways, a Jesus. It's hard to find for me a spot to put God. And the funny thing is, I did put in here right away that I'm here to learn. I don't debate. A debate, to me, I remember in school. You walked in grade 9, you were handed one side, and your opponent was handed the other side, and you debated it. I'm a discussionist. If you can convince me of something, I'm going to get off here tonight and I'm going to go research it. And I will be honest with you, Dennis, I have never spoke to a man in a debate or in person that I have ever walked away and said, I got to look into that. I've already considered that. I've already looked into that. And I found that there was very little evidence to believe in it, to look into it. There was just really nothing there to back it. So, your question to me, how do I fall? Richard Dawkins really does sum a lot of stuff up to me. And Richard Dawkins, he's said several times he doesn't want to be held up as the atheist God, but he really does cover it well. We're really finding a lot of stuff out. We're learning a lot. And if God's going to come into this, I feel he's going to come into it later, not sooner. So in other words, let's not bring him in with ignorance. Let's bring him in once we get to the end and we say, there really is no reason that that time and space could have pushed itself forward, because that's really what it comes down to between me and you now, is what pushed time forward. We've got the Big Bang. I think we both agree with the Big Bang Theory, do we not?
Yeah, we do.
So
absolutely.
What allowed time to move forward? This is the hard part, and I've struggled with it. What pushes time forward when you don't have time? And that really is for people like yourself, that is our last little hole that we may never fill. But that's where we really got to fit God into, is he decided to push that first domino over and get this whole shit show started. And that's kind of, for me, if there's a spot for God, it's going to be there, Dennis. But beyond that, I don't need him to explain anything else that I see. And I'll be honest with you, I got a little bit of time here and then I can't wait for the discussion. I really respect you. You're a very well-educated man. And I went on the chat ahead of time and I said, look, don't start on this guy as, don't be here, hey, atheist, go atheist. This is really a discussion on, can we, me and the fellow atheists, find any reason for God? And I'll be honest with you, we are, you got your Kent Hovens and you got your Ray Comforts and you got your Eric Hovens. We're not sinners. We're not people looking to sin. We're not people not looking to follow the teachings of God. To be honest with you, if you look into the first, the Old Testament, I live a much more, in my opinion, moral life than anything that was written in the Old Testament. I'm not against gays. I'm very much for human rights. I'm very much for, not stoning children that are out of control. There's just a lot of room for us to have this discussion. I just don't know where to put God, and I don't know where we've really got a hole to put him in. And that really sums up kind of, unless Tammy here, my wife, wants to say something. Now, as I mentioned in the opening here and online, my wife is a Christian. She was raised old earth. So, that's really it's a really interesting relationship we're in. But I think she, I don't want to speak for her, but I think she's kind of young earth. Yeah, that's it.
Young earth. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Right. So, she's, but I honestly think she started to even question that. So I'm going to give her the last minute here to see if she has anything to add.
No, I was just going to say, I didn't even know that as a Christian, we really had options. I thought we were all young earth creationists, and I didn't know that there was any difference. And then, being with Mark, of course, we have our differences there. But then, after talking to you the one night, I was like, oh, maybe we have, options with all the evidence that we see. Maybe we can believe that God is a part of, evolution.
Of a process, of an evolutionary process. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm learning, and it's quite interesting.
But Tammy, that's a great statement, because this really typifies a lot of the church community. There's this subtle young earth creationism is the only way to go. When I returned to church at age 25, I was a flaming young earth creationist. And, but there was this, there's these guys who are old earth creationists, progressive creationists, but they really don't trust the Bible. They don't trust God's word. And in particular, when it came to, in those days, they were called theistic evolutionists. Those guys are written completely off the board. I mean, they were seen as the weakest of all Christians, and really they're stumbling blocks, and there was no place for them. So being within that environment as a new Christian, you can imagine how I hooked into this young earth creationism quite well. Now, I'll also say something. There's some reasonable arguments they're not that deep, but for someone who hasn't got a background, and remember at that point, my training was, I was a dentist at this point, you know, how much evolutionary science did I know, or geology? Well, you know what the answer is, it's this much. And to push it even further, how much understanding of scripture did I know other than reading it literally the way I'd read my literal journals, my dental journals? And of course, you know, the answer is zero. So it's changing, but it's changing slowly. And I'm going to quote one of my favorite philosophers of science, Thomas S. Kuhn, in his famous Structure of Scientific Revolutions. We talk about the Copernican revolution. And he says this, and it's not tongue in cheek, but it's kind of edgy. He says, how do ideas change within the academy? In other words, within universities? And he says, one death at a time. Boy, there's a lot of truth in that. In other words, there's a generation that has to pass, and a new generation has to come up and take the position of leadership. So when it comes to the church, I'm of that older generation. We're most of us in positions of leadership, and most of them are young earth creationists. And I mean, I know many of them who know I'm a Christian, but they will block me from speaking in their churches. I mean, this is, and there's also an element of expedience. I mean, if you're in a church, and if you're in a Protestant church, pastors get fired for heresy and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So if all of a sudden some pastor invites Denis Lamoureux, who, you know, totally believes in human evolution, you can count on it. There's going to be some pushback. And, you know, I've had friends lose their job, Christians at Christian institutions, because of the evolution thing. And so how do we do this? Well, you know, this is why I'm part of this forum is, you know, I'm not going to get fired for the things I say. Mark's not going to get fired for the things he says. And then we can have this conversation. And so, but let me bring it back to Mark. Look, we're totally on board when it comes to the Big Bang. And remember, I'm a biologist. My biology specialty is teeth and jaws evolution. So I'm in awe of all these physicists, and biologists aren't supposed to say this, but, you know, I have physics envy. I'm amazed at the mathematics of these guys. And these guys can rewind the clock all the way back to Planck time, t to the minus 43rd of a second. Tell me that ain't impressive.
It is.
And given the state of knowledge today, the best we can say is there was this massive explosion. Did it just happen out of nothing? Or is there some sort of God who lit the firecracker of the Big Bang? And the moment we start saying either God's behind the Big Bang, or there is no God behind the Big Bang, we are now doing that term metaphysics. We're now talking about ultimate beliefs. And the thing about ultimate beliefs is they get really crazy personal. And that's the challenge of them. Now, at the same time, I will say, could it be there's a bunch of big bangs and big crunches, and that's what we're in this eternal sort of flux? Possibility, but no data for it yet. Could it be there are a lot of different universes, you know, parallel to us? Could be, but we don't know it yet. So here's the thing about science. Science is amazing. You put rovers on Mars. Tell me that isn't unbelievable. You know, we do heart transplants. Tell me that's not unbelievable.
Just to be sure that we, forgive me for cutting in, just to, regarding the question of whether or not evolution undermines Christianity.
Okay. Well, it's related. Whether you're going to talk about the Big Bang, and from the Big Bang, obviously we end up getting, you know, biological evolution. It becomes a matter, and Mark may not like the word, but I think it's a relevant one. It's a matter of faith. Do you believe God's behind the Big Bang and obviously the biological evolutionary process, or not? And so
and the funny thing is, thinkers are allowed to believe whatever they want. We really, if we've proven anything over the last 100 years, is that the oddest of thoughts are not to be discounted as imaginary or not to be considered. So my thoughts, when I lay down in bed and I look at my black ceiling and I'm going to sleep, I see our universe honestly popping out of the other end of a black hole when it reaches a critical mass. I have been thinking about this for the last 10 years. I honestly believe that new universes pop out of black holes. I think at a certain point, a universe builds up so much mass in one of its black holes that out of the other side possibly comes a new universe. It's been talked about a lot. I've thought about it before it was ever talked about. I thought it made sense to me. So I think we got to even push God further. We got to push him back past the Big Bang. We got to push him back to the point of where did these universes start from? I have no doubt we're going to find out that it's a multiverse. I really believe that. That is who I am. If you're an old Earth believer, and I hate to keep bringing them up. Let's not use Kent. Let's say if Ray Comfort is a young Earth creationist, I am a multiverse atheist. And as I continue to regress backwards and backwards and backwards, it gets harder to find a God. It really does, Dennis. And that's the part.
Mark, but the thing is, you can go ahead and here's the first thing. We only know, and I mean, and this is conditional. We go back to the Big Bang and everything's speculation beyond that, if indeed there are the universes. And let's say there are multiple universes. That still doesn't solve the problem of God. The question becomes, then, did God, we've been surprised by science and God lots of times. Could it be that God is the creator of the multiverse, and however the multiverse came about? And I suspect if there's a multiverse, there's probably a process by which the multiverse came about. But I'm speaking out of total ignorance because I'm not a cosmologist. So this doesn't solve anything. We're still back to taking that step of faith in terms of, is there someone behind it, or someone's, maybe it's multiple, or nothing at all? That is ultimately, that's a theological decision. That's not a scientific decision. It's a statement of faith. So look,
and that's where Dennis, you really, if my ears have ever turned on the side of my head, it was when me and you had a conversation and you said to me at the end of that conversation, and Mark, there may be nothing. This may all just be chance. Absolutely. It just happened. But, and I hate to do this because this feels to me like the atheist cop-out, is to say, if you've got a God, where did God come from? And I know James is going to push us back to the evolution theory, but the evolution theory, it's done. We know that there's no conversation for Denis and I here.
Yeah.
We both believe in evolution. We know it started this way. We know that it started from amino acids. We know how this got started. I think we both can completely agree that we're going to go back way before that. We're going to find out where God came from, not where evolution came from, not where the earth came from, not where the universe came from. Where did God come from, and how do we fit him in? Well, and why is he any more believable than any other of the 1,000 gods that we have believed in the past?
Forgive me for cutting in, just because sometimes I do get a little fire from people for the titles. Is that so? I totally agree. Like, I think everybody understands that Mark and Denis, you were both in agreement. Like, evolution for sure happened, no doubt on either side.
That's correct.
Just in terms, though, like I think I gather from Mark that he would say, like, it doesn't undermine Christianity at all from his perspective. And is that something that you'd agree with, Mark?
Absolutely. And James, unless you're going to show your picture, I don't think you have the right to talk.
Gotcha. You bet.
Oh, you are on there now. You're finally there. I didn't see you on my phone.
I do, yes.
You're just not on my screen, so you're actually up and you're there. Good stuff.
But I want to say so sorry, Tammy, that I hadn't had a proper introduction for you, and I also updated the border. So your name is in the border now on the watch screen as well. So cool. I just wanted to let you know we really welcome you here, and I was just embarrassed that I wasn't ready for you. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah, this is my wife, Tammy. So Tammy was raised young Earth creationist. She came out of the west of Canada. Apparently, there's a pocket of young Earth creationists.
Oh,
I
there's a
know
lot.
everybody.
There's a lot.
Yes,
Not just a
yes. Okay,
pocket.
well, that's actually where Denis is from.
Yeah.
And there's a pocket there, and there's a pocket to the eastern, southern United States, and that's where they come from. And unfortunately for Christianity, they are the circus. And for Tammy and I, in our marriage, we've had to kind of agree to disagree. But any young Earth creationist watching this debate right now, Tammy has had to give a bit. She has learned. She has taken the time to listen into the videos that I listen to. And she has come back and said, yes, some of this stuff doesn't make sense. And that's where you're going to find the honesty. We're all searching for honesty. Denis and I are on agreement. We have to find a spot for God, and that is really where it ends. For people to argue about the alleles, about the genes, about the retroviruses, about the I hope Denis will not tell me there was a flood, because we have no proof for a flood. We may have a local flood.
There's a local flood.
Okay, I can agree with that. I'll give you a local flood. Damn, we had a flood here last year. We will give you a flood. But let's admit it, we know so much about genetics that we know there was never a bottleneck. And we know, we just had Kent. I hate bringing Ken up. Boy, I wish he was here to defend himself. But if you have a tiger chasing a kangaroo, I own both. Believe me, that kangaroo's not getting away, and you now have extinct kangaroos.
They're sleeping in the ark. You gotta realize there's an argument there.
And when they got off the ark, there was a salted earth. There was only 2 of each animals, and there is no way the kangaroo made it. They are one of the dumbest animals I've ever met. God bless their souls. I love my kangaroo. His name is Boomer. But if there's a tiger and Boomer is not winning. He is not going to win. So let's just, and this is where I knew tonight was going to be a very hard conversation to have. And I knew it was going to get a little bit long, because at the end of the day, Denis has to say to me, Mark, you got to look in this little pocket, and this is where we're going to put our God. And this is the spot. It really is up to Denis to show me where the natural world cannot unfold the way that it unfolded without a God. And for me, it's who pushed the first domino. You have no time. Atheists out there, I'm with you 100%. I don't want anyone out there thinking, oh, Mark's not, he's letting us down. I'm not. I'm just saying, who pushed the first domino? We have no one. Is it a critical mass? Is it a critical temperature? Is it a critical something that we don't understand that just causes?
Is it an eternal being?
Exactly. And where did he come from, Denis? Where did God come from?
That's by definition what an eternal being is. And so here, Mark, in our discussion, when it comes to everything before the Big Bang, I will simply give you eternal matter and energy, fluxing back and forth. And inversely, you have to give me an eternal being. Otherwise, we're going to get into an infinite regress of who created, where did this come from? Where did this come from? And this will go forever, and we're not going to solve anything. So here's my one suggestion. Let's get back into the current cosmos. And here's some of the features. Here's some of the features that I find so stunning about it. For example, all the anthropic data on the Big Bang. It strikes everyone, and this was not a religious conspiracy, but came out of physics departments during the 1970s, that the fine-tuning of things like the explosive force of the Big Bang, in contrast to the collapsing force, the gravitational force, was 1 part in 10 to the 60th. And these numbers go on and on. And in other words, if you changed it by 1 part in 10 to the 60th, if the force was that much greater, then we would have never had planets emerging. If it was 1/10 of the 60th weaker, then the Big Bang would have recollapsed on itself. And there are gobs and gobs of numbers like that. Now, that does not prove a God. The word prove is too strong. But is this an argument of suspicion? And, you know, I'll give you an example of Roger Penrose. He tries to put all these numbers together. He says that the universe is fine-tuned by 10 to 10 to the 123rd. Okay, 10 to 10 to the 123rd. What in the world does that number mean?
That's more atoms than there are in the universe.
I know this is, look, there's only 10 to the 80th atoms. And of course, you know, as every time you go up one power, it just goes even wider and wider. So when you get to 10 to 10 to the 123rd, it's my undergrads, I love this language. It's crazy.
But Dennis, can I say something there?
Yep, absolutely.
The chances, you see my beautiful wife beside me here?
Yep.
The chance of me meeting her and her name being Tammy and me and her living out the life that we live out, and the chances that me and her went to Tim Hortons today and bought a coffee, and not only did we buy a coffee, but I bought a coffee and she decided instead to get a, what did you get? A tea. She decided today to get a tea, which is very unusual for her. The chances of us meeting, the chances of our parents meeting, their parents meeting, we could regress this back thousands of generations. You get to the point where nothing would happen unless it happened. So the reason we are here, Dennis, is because we are here. It really is that simple.
Well, that doesn't reflect the numbers, Mark. I mean, it's back to if this anthropic data was simply written off the way you're trying to write it off right now, then it certainly wouldn't have made its way into the departments of physics and physics literature. So it remains a pretty serious data point. Now, let's zoom forward. And, you know, when I was an undergrad, I'm going to read the quote for you. Not an undergrad. When I was a graduate student during the 1980s, Antony Flew was the most famous atheist of the time. I mean, he was the Richard Dawkins of the 1980s. The difference between Flew and Richard Dawkins is Antony Flew is a total gentleman. And Mark, I suspect you've probably heard of the conversion of Antony Flew, you know, the famous atheist, and wrote a book entitled "There Is a God: How the World's Most Notorious Atheist Changed His Mind." And the reason he changed his mind was all this new molecular data. And I've been exposed to this, and being in biology for over 40 years now. I mean, when I started biology in 1972, yeah, it was complex, but the level of complexity right now is absolutely stunning. And especially when it comes to the Genome Project. And here's what Antony Flew said: the biologist's investigation of DNA has shown by almost unbelievable complexity that the arrangements to produce life, that intelligence must have been involved. The only satisfying explanation for the origin of such end-directed self-replicating life as we see it on Earth is an infinitely intelligent mind. Okay, Antony Flew might be wrong in his conclusion, but he's looking at some serious data, and I've seen that same sort of data, and it's really suspicious that someone's behind that. And of course, we're talking about intelligent design. Now, the counter, Richard Dawkins, of course, you know, he wrote off Antony Flew as, an old man whose brain was rotting. And that's typical Richard Dawkins. But what's amazing about Dawkins, in 1986, he published The Blind Watchmaker. And he went out of his way to try to write off design. And here's a quote from Dawkins, and it starts the book. The problem is that of complex design. Well, hold it. Why is it a problem, Dawkins? It's a problem because the vast majority of people knows where this goes. Continues, he says, every single one of more than 1 trillion cells in the body contains about 1,000 times as much precisely coded digital information as my entire computer. The complexity of living organisms is matched by the elegancy of, and here's the movie makes, the apparent design. You see, if you don't want a God, and I'm coming back to that original statement about whether one has a personal relationship with God or not, that's going to influence their conclusions. And that's why he calls it an apparent design. And then look, and then when he writes it, I think it's just stunning. Support for my view on intelligent design. He says, if anyone doesn't agree that this amount of complex design cries out for an explanation, I give up. In other words, if anyone says to Dick, I don't even know what you're talking about in this design stuff, Dawkins will say, I give up. I won't waste my time with you. Then Dawkins says the following, which is absolutely stunning. Our world is dominated by, number one, feats of engineering, and number two, works of art. We are entirely accustomed to the idea that complex elegance is an indicator of premeditated, crafted design. And look at what he says here. This is probably the most powerful reason, and I love he uses the word reason rather than proof. It's an argument. The most powerful reason for and he's also using another term very accurately, the belief held by the vast majority of people that have ever lived in some kind of supernatural deity. So when it comes to nature, and this is not designed for just today, this has been the experience of humans throughout time. Here is Dawkins affirming this. Of course, he'd say they're all deluded. I'm deluded. We're all wrong. But I think it's a serious data point that nature, to use the biblical language of Psalm 19, nature declares the glory of God, and so too do the heavens. And so I think what we have here, and it's back to, we all have to make that final step of faith. Whether one wants to go in that direction or not, it's totally personal. It really is.
Denis,
Mark.
You've said a lot.
I'm just quoting two of my favorite guys.
So for the atheists, I will tell you one thing. Dawkins is not our God. He is not the end all and be all. He is very good at biology. He understands biology. And we believe when he speaks biology because he has earned his doctorate in that. And that is what he speaks of very clearly. But again, so let's say there's a God. Let's agree that there is a God. How are we going to explain things like parasites? How are we going to explain things like cell regeneration to the point of cancer where it kills us? Now, you got to give me a minute. You just spoke for 8 minutes. I'm not like Ken Hogan again. I hate to bring him up. But Denis,
you sure seem to like the guy.
He intrigues me. I've been following from him for 8 years, and I dream at night about some of the shit he says, and I can't get it out of my mind. So many people that follow this guy, and I don't know why. It's so obvious.
Oh, Mark, there's no mystery on that. Mark, there's no mystery on that. It speaks of the level of general education within the culture. There was a study.
I agree, Denis.
There was a study in 2014 of Americans, and 25% of Americans believe the sun literally moves across the sky.
Wow.
So if you've got that number on something as simple as astronomy, do not be surprised when it comes to the biology issue. You're going to have a horrid problem with biology, which is much more complex.
Yeah, and let's make it clear to the listeners, I always have to...
Mark, I can't hear you.
Oh, you there?
Yeah. Okay. Try again.
You know, I always hear, why are there so many? We've got Pelagia, we've got Vice Rhino, we've got Armored Skeptic, we've got you, we've got me, we've got so many Canadian people that are talking on this thing. We needed to make it clear to the listeners that in Canada, we don't grow up with a heavy push towards religion. Religion is something that is really a choice for us. It's not like the United States. It's not pushed on us in the same kind of way. When we come to religion in Canada, we come to it honestly. And that's where people like Denis need that special spot where it's not the Ray Comforts, it's not the Kent Hovens. We really did come to it on our own. I came to my atheistic beliefs on my own, and it was very clear to me that I found no spot for God. So again, though, Denis, I say to you, where do we fit in the cancers? Where do the parasites come from in the plan of all this? All these mistakes that are made, our DNA, 2/3 of it is made up of mistakes and junk. Where do we get that from with a God?
Well, hold it, Mark. Just hold it. You're raising a lot of really great questions. You're asking the question of theodicy. Theodicy, justification for why all the suffering in the world with a personal God who's supposed to be all powerful, all loving, and all knowing. Okay, that's one question. Now, the other question you're talking about, junk DNA, Mark, that has gone by the wayside. The ENCODE project, and I remember the days, I'm old enough to remember the days that 98% of the genome was junk. And of course, wasn't that a great argument for atheism? But the ENCODE project, which came after the Genome Project in 2003, has blown that completely out of the water. And there's about 80% of that stuff in the genome that actually has some sort of function. And they're still in the process of starting to understand that. So before we start writing that off, I'm not there. Now, I'll be the first to admit, look, when it comes to chimpanzees, we have 10,000 pseudogenes, genes that no longer work that we share with them. But when you look at 10,000 genes, that's a pretty minor part of the genome per se. And it shouldn't be surprised that we'd have some relic genes. That would be part of the process. Now, let's get back to the theodicy question, because Mark, if you want to know what the Achilles heel is to anyone who believes in a personal God, a theistic God, it's the problem of evil in the world. And the standard approach to this, as I'm going to sort of outline roughly my theodicy, and you'll see this in all theodicy books, is they make a distinction very quickly between moral evil and they'll use the term natural evil. And when it comes to a lot of evil on this planet, don't blame God, blame us. We're the cause. Now, you talked about parasites and such, and I don't like calling that natural evil. I think that's a spin-off from Christian categories. I prefer to call these horrid natural realities. For example,
Denis, can I just ask you a quick question? Do you believe in death before sin?
Oh yeah, well, there's all sorts of death before sin. I mean, you need death for evolution to move forward. So Precisely. What you're asking is a classic young earth creationist argument whereby you have Adam, then he sins, then he's condemned to death. I think that's an ancient understanding of the origin of death. What we find in the Bible is an ancient understanding of the origin of life. Things are created, and the technical term is de novo, quick and complete. And that's just not the Bible. That's all your ancient texts. Everything's created quick and complete. So if the Bible has an ancient understanding of the origin of life, the Bible will have an ancient understanding of the origin of death. So don't go to the Bible to find out how death came into the world. And in fact, if we look at the fossil record, we can dismiss this traditional notion that, death came into the world because of sin, because humans are at the very top of the fossil record, and you got hundreds of millions of years of death. So obviously there's a disconnect, but I look at that and say, it's just like the three-tier universe in the Bible. It's an ancient understanding. So let's get back to the issue of theodicy. So I write off moral theology because we're the problem of most of the suffering on this planet. Now, and I won't use the term natural evil. I think that's some Christian categories that got slipped into this idea. Now, are there horrid natural realities in the world? The answer is yes. That is part of this world. But do they have purpose? And what I'll do to answer that is I'll go back to the theodicy of moral theodicies in people to get a lesson from there. And let me quote Solzhenitsyn. I mean, everyone knows Solzhenitsyn, the great writer, who spent a good part of his life in the Gulag in Russia. And remember, these jails in Russia, these aren't 3 meals every day, an exercise room, colored TV, and if you want to get a university degree, you can. The Gulag was hell. And here's what Solzhenitsyn says. And the reason I'm reading this is I'm going to try to extract something from Solzhenitsyn to ask a question about natural, horrid natural realities. And he says, it was only when I laid there on, I love this, the rotting prison straw. I mean, that's what you get for a bed in the gulag. That I sensed within myself the first stirrings of good. Gradually, it was disclosed to me that the line separating good and evil passes not through states, nor between classes, nor between political parties either, but right through every human heart and through all human hearts. And this is the kicker. That is why I turn back to my years of imprisonment and say sometimes, to the astonishment of those about me, bless you, prison. I nourished my soul there, and I say without hesitation, bless you, prison, for having been in my life. So let's take this example of moral evil that's being used. And of course, you can ask a lot of people of some of the rough things they've gone through. And of course, they'll be the first to say, I wouldn't give this to my enemies. But are they grateful for the experience? And I will tell you, there are things in my life that were just pure hell. I look back at those and I see something edifying about them, in the sense that it helps for me to grow spiritually. So could it be that certain physical disabilities push us forward spiritually to view life in a different way? And I'll give you an example of a friend of mine who blew me away when he said to this. This is a guy who's been a cripple since childhood. When we go out, we have to pick him up because he can't go upstairs. And one day he said to me, I would not be the man I am today if it wasn't for my physical disability. And I sat there in utter stunned amazement. And you know, when I start doing this section in my course, and I teach only undergrads, 85% of these young people say that when it comes to the bumps and bruises in the universe, I'm grateful for them because I've grown spiritually through them. So I'm not giving you a complete answer for all the physical disabilities and physical bumps and bruises in the world, but I think there's a principle to be held here that God set up a world. Yes, I think it's intelligent design. It points to mine, but I think in the designing, it also included some of the bumps and bruises to push us forward when it comes to developing our relationship with God and our spirituality and us personally as people. Look, at you and I have lived long enough and we've seen this. We've experienced it. We've seen it with friends. It's amazing how some people come through things and they look back at them and they go, I'll tell you, it's like Solzhenitsyn. My soul was nourished through this.
And yet I've never had that feeling. Everything that I've been through, I've pushed myself through it. I've pushed my family through it. I've never felt like there was a deity that got involved.
Forget deity for a second. Forget deity. But did you not grow from that?
See, the thing you got to realize, Dennis.
No, answer the question, Mark.
No.
I'm sure you did. Tammy, I want you to answer for him. Did he not grow going through some of these things? Don't we all grow as we go through some of these things?
I believe so.
But why? What does it do for us, though? At the end of the day, when we say to ourselves that a God took care of something, were we not the people? Was science not the reason we made it through it? Was medicine not the reason we made it through it? I died for 17 minutes when I was 19 years old. I had a child that was 3 months old and I died. There was no lights. There was no nothing. The only reason I made it through was because I happened to be in an operating room that had bypass machines that could keep my brain alive while they cleared the clot out of my heart. And I see nothing. That was after 17 minutes. If anyone is going to come into this world with spiritual beliefs, it's going to be somebody that died for that long. My first realization back into this world was my entire family standing around me, my cousins, my uncles, my mother, my father, looking at me. That was when I woke up. This was after a car accident. I went in for an operation and I died from a blood clot. And it's just, I don't know still where to fit the supernatural in. I heard everything that you said. I really did, Dennis. And I heard your you know, this to the power of 128. There is so many things in this world that are to the power of 128 or 120, whatever the case is. But really, do we believe in a God for it? Or are these powers of unpredictability or the chances of something happening? I think these mathematical chances of things producing the way they do are going to happen in any situation. I never believe that these possibility parameters or the way people speak, like, well, the chances of this happening are the chances of this to the power of, are anything more than, well, that is the chance of anything. For example, a snowflake to come out with the physical
Structure.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
For a snowflake to look exactly the way that snowflake looks, if you look into that, the chances are it's just impossible for a snowflake to produce itself to look that way. But again, Dennis, when we take this back to the furthest regression possible, it's what is God needed for? Where could things not happen if we didn't have God? Where couldn't this happen?
We're frozen. Well,
oh, you're back.
Okay, I'm back. Okay, so look at so we're agreeing there's a bit of an impasse on whether someone's behind the Big Bang, and that's fair enough. Where do we have a God? Well, this is my God. My God came into space and time when humans emerged. And let me use a scientific study. You probably are aware of it. 1996 or 97, April 3rd, in the journal Nature. It was a study of the religious beliefs of scientists. And it was a repeat study from 1916 by a guy named James Lerba. And one of the questions, which was really brilliant, was whether scientists believed there was a God in intellectual and emotional communication with humankind. And the definition, the question even better, that is a God to whom one may pray in expectation of receiving an answer. And the answer is more than the subjective psychological effect of prayer. Okay, in 1916, about 40% of US scientists believed such a God, all scientists. And James Lerba says, well, part of the problem is there's still a lot of religion in the culture. Let's go ahead and secularize universities and we'll get rid of this God stuff. Well, in comes 1997. They repeat the study, and what's the number? 40% of US scientists in the who's who of American science, so these guys are players, believe that God answers prayer that's more than psychological and subjective. And Mark, I'm going to pull a dirty trick on you. If you want to know where God is, the Holy Spirit is in a vessel sitting right beside you. You want evidence for God? That's where you'll find it. It's all around you, man.
But is it really? Like you've already admitted, okay, Dennis, so you believe in evolution. So which was the last primate that got to go to heaven? And I know this is a dirty trick.
No, that's not a dirty trick. That's a good question. Okay. The answer is I have no idea. I will tell you in the same, well, look at, so we're not talking about going down to 2 pre-humans. I mean, that's genetically doesn't work. So it is a population. And if we're going to do population genetics, you know, it's not like it's one group. I will say it's somewhere around 50,000 years ago. And I mean, you know this about the behaviorally modern humans. They sort of show up on the scene very, very quickly. Lots and lots of archaeological data. Some people call this period the neurological Big Bang. And so I would say it's in that area that, you know, the image of God starts being manifested in humans. And if we're going to talk about this notion of the image of God, and of course, you know where you got it from Genesis 1, the creation account. If indeed we've been created in the image of God, I mean, this is a subtext. In fact, I was writing about this in my book today. Very few Christians pick this up. that if we're created in the likeness and image of God, and God has just spent that whole chapter creating stuff, what does this mean if we have this element of God? We're going to have this crazy creative impulse. And if all the animals on this planet, and think of chimps, are almost identical to us in the flesh, we are radically, radically different than chimps. I mean, a Nobel Prize winning chimp is one who stands in a box in his cage, takes a stick, and knocks the banana out of the roof. That's about as far as you get with a chimp. But we put rovers on Mars. We have flybys at Pluto. I mean, if the scripture's right on this, we are the most massive example of God's creative impulse because we've been gifted with God's likeness and the image of God.
It's funny you say that, because if you actually wanted to look at the second most intelligent beings or animals on Earth, you'd actually have to move towards elephants or dolphins. You would not look to chimpanzees or apes. That is not it. Again, we are a separation of the apes. We did not evolve from apes. We separated when apes went off. They became the bonobos. They became this, that, and we became man. If you want to look at, so you can look at dolphins, and I know people are going to look at this like, where the heck is he going? But if you look at dolphins, they are one of the closest other animals on Earth that have a hierarchy. They have justice. They will kill another dolphin for doing things that they consider to be immoral, if you want to say that, or against the beliefs of the general group of dolphins or that thing. They will actually kill a dolphin for acting outside. This is stuff we've known.
Oh yeah, but this is, years. I mean, this is evolutionary psychology, and I don't deny it whatsoever. I mean, we should have no surprises. There's those elements of compassion. I don't know if you want to use the term justice, but that's fair enough. I'll work with it. But Mark, I guarantee you, there is no place in any ocean tonight that dolphins are having a conversation like you and I over the internet using their computers. And so too elephants. There's no comparison. What?
Is that though just for the fact that they don't have the conversation? Like, Denis, let's be honest with the audience. Me and you had a discussion that we all have this inherent feeling that there's something out there that we don't understand. And I even said to you, I would not sleep in a graveyard. I would not go to a morgue and sleep. I would not go to an insane asylum where thousands of people have been put to sleep and go to sleep without, in the back of my mind, this feeling of the supernatural, or this feeling of, is there something that is more than just something that is within the realm of us that will come after us? So is that a feeling that is inherent in us that proves a God, or is that completely the opposite and the proof that our minds are predisposed to believing in gods? Where do we fit these beliefs into?
Oh, let's go all the way back to the Big Bang. I think it's all been loaded. I think it was all God's design. And I teach a course on evolutionary psychology. So when it comes to this religious impulse, I mean, this is part of the process. In fact, I'll argue that those individuals, those groups of individuals, and I'll use the term, who didn't get religion are the ones that did not survive. But those who did get religion are the ones who outcompeted those who did not. And evidence for that is, when it comes to religiosity, it is a universal amongst humans. So this is not a behavioral thing we learned. This is a deeply ingrained hard drive thing that we have in our brains. Now, when I say religiosity, I'm not talking about the story of Muhammad or Jesus or anything like that. That goes after the fact. But there's a deep impulse. And that's why I think that intelligent design stuff is so powerful. And why, when Richard Dawkins is really affirming, saying, anyone who doesn't see this stuff, I give up on him. It's crying out for an explanation. Well, the explanation's really, really simple. I think there's a mind behind all this. Einstein made this great quote. He says, the greatest mystery of the world is the world's comprehensibility. And of course, being a math guy and a physics guy, these guys see all numbers everywhere, left, right, and center. And if you want to find a place where there's a lot of belief, it's the mathematicians. And so I don't think it's a mystery at all. I think it's a reflection of the mind of God. Now, whether people want to take that step, that's not an intellectual step anymore. You're now coming into my camp of spirituality. This is a spiritual step. And if you want to know what being religious is, it's simply this. Man, I'm grateful for your life, my life. Thank you. Thank you, God, for giving me this life. And you know something, Mark, when you had that crazy accident, I bet you when you walked away from it, yeah, let's say the meds did a lot of wonderful things. But I'm sure you must have been grateful to the meds and all that medical science that allowed you to get the clot out of your brain. And the reason this is kind of personal for me is because I've got this severe focal stenosis in my posterior cerebral artery, which means I'm going to die from a stroke. And what do I make about that? That's just part of the deck of cards that I've been given. And what this challenge has done to me is every day is a good day for me. I have bad days, but I mean, I'm grateful for every day. But knowing I got this bomb in my head, I'm grateful for every day. And this is really what religiosity is all about. It's just saying to someone way bigger than me, thank you. And I mean, this is what science does to both of us. We're in awe of science. I know you're in awe of science. And we have the brains to be able to unpack this. Back to Einstein. You know, where does all this rationality come from? I think it's a simple step, but it's also a very difficult step for many people who do not want to say thank you to someone above us. That's the story of faith. It's as simple as that.
You see, though, Denis, for me, honestly, death to me is the end of a life. So I get to live my life, and then at the end of it, as an atheist, I finally get to die. I'm 51 years old. I wasn't here in 1967. I was born in 1968. And in 2068, I'm going to be surely gone. And I am really happy with that. For me to think that I have to live on for eternity would just be something I, as an individual, would not want to play into. It is not something that I want to be part of. And now I know that denying something is not a reason to opt out, but honestly, I am one of those people, and I'm sure that any atheist listening to this right now can chime in on the chat. We have decided that for us to live on for eternity is not something that we want. What is it about the religious that wants this? Why do you want this? What is this?
Hold it. It's not a question of want. It's a question of is. Is there life after death? And in the same way, it takes a step to believe whether there is a God behind the Big Bang or not. It also takes a step of faith. I mean, you're pretty certain that there's nothing on the other side. But Mark, you don't absolutely know that. And the best you can basically do is say, this is an extension of my atheism. But Mark, there might be something on the other side. Now, let's talk about heaven. You know, the picture of heaven you get from Christians is you're going to be sitting in a cloud, plucking away on a harp. And if you happen to show up in a cloud plucking away on a harp, I'll probably say you're stuck in hell, because that is not what heaven's about. I look at this world, this creation, this mind-blowing creation, and look at, you're a learner. You love thinking. This is what heaven's going to be. It's going to be more learning. It'll be more discovering. And you said you were, born in 68. Well, I'm a little ahead of you. I was 54. And when 67 came along in Canada, that's when color TV came to Edmonton, and Star Trek. And I got to see Star Trek in color for the first time. And if you look at some of those old episodes, the colors are really bad. But I've been a Star Trek fan for the longest time. And I look at Star Trek and I say to myself, wouldn't I love to be on the voyages of the Enterprise going from universe to universe type thing? And that, to me, if finite human minds, and I'll even qualify it, sinful human minds, can come up with something as mind-blowing and as cool and as amazing as Star Trek, I fully expect heaven's going to be way better than that, because it comes back to what sort of God do I believe? I believe in a God in love. You think the God in love would put you in a box and let you spend eternity bored out of your tree, especially since he's given you this amazing mind? I can't imagine this God doing this. This God of love would be giving us all these amazing opportunities to discover. And but here's the bottom line, Mark. It's when we die, we're going to actually figure this out. This is often called eschatological verification. Eschatological is end times verification. So the ultimate test will be what happens if we end up on the other side. If you're right, it really doesn't matter now, does it? But if I'm right, there might be some significant implications. And no, I'm not asking you to take Pascal's wager, but I would simply say your boredom argument of heaven, that's off the table. That's just think of how cool things are right here. Be assured heaven would be way better than as much fun as we're having today, you know, doing scholarship together type stuff.
But at the same time, Denis, does it really make sense? Like I said, for myself, I don't want heaven. I don't want to go on for eternity. But let's say, okay, you believe in evolution. That means you believe at certain points, certain animals diverged off in to become, we all at one point became what we are from a single cell organism. Why is it that humans are the only group of people? Why did we wait for this time, let's say 3.5 billion years later, that we have stopped and man is the final option? Man is the final, he is the one that God was waiting for to evolve into man. Now, he's the one going to heaven, not whatever we evolve into or other organisms evolve into in, let's say, another billion years. Why are we the ones? Why are we the ones that have this mind, that believe in God? We inherently have this supernatural belief. Why are we the chosen ones, Denis? Why?
Because I'm not God and you're not God. And if you happen to be God, you can make those decisions. But coming back, say, if we're going to answer that through a Christian perspective, the reason humans are here is so humans can love God, that we can love one another horizontally. I mean, these are Jesus' two great commandments. Love the Lord your God with all your mind, look at all your soul, all your body, and all your mind. So doing good scholarship, I'll say, is a holy act. And also love your neighbor as yourself. So the whole purpose of this universe is to experience love in particular. And if you ask me as a Christian, what is, and I do this in class. We have a discussion on what is your strongest argument. And I look at the class and I say, you bet, as me as a guy with 3 earned doctoral degrees, you figure I'm going to give you some sort of complex mathematical type of thing. And I say, no. And I go to the blackboard and I write love. Love is the most amazing thing in the entire universe. We've all experienced it. To me, love has an origin and it comes, and this is why I'm a Christian. It's not to say other religions don't talk about God being love, but the Christian religion really focuses on God is love. And so the whole purpose is so that we can love God. Now, you've asked a great question. Why does God wait, in the case of, say, what's the number down? 12.8 billion years for the universe. If it was a young earth creationist world, it would be a dead giveaway, because this is what we'd see in the fossil record. Right down at the very base, each and every one of different animals would die because of Adam's sin. And instead of seeing a pattern going, and I use the vertebrates from fish to amphibians to reptiles to mammals, all these would be at the same base and they go all the way through the fossil record. Inversely, if the progressive creationist model is true, then what you're going to have is land plants, then the sun. There are going to be some cold land plants for billions of years because the days are purportedly, geological ages. Then you'll have birds and fish, and of course, there's no birds and fish in the fossil record as being the first animals, and then land animals because birds come from reptiles, from dinosaurs. So that pattern goes by the wayside. And it comes back to my final slide that I presented today. Here is the brilliance of the evolutionary process. Mark, you have a choice to decide on whether God's behind it or not. And it's not set up in such a fashion where God twists your arm and says, here is scientific proof I exist. Because when it comes to the fossil pattern predictions of young earth creation and progressive creation, that would be that type of God. But that is not the God of love. God does not coerce. God gives us our freedom. God gives us different experiences from which, whether we want to follow the direction of God or not, that's the freedom we have. So here's the freedom you have by the evolutionary process. You have a freedom to decide whether evolution is teleological or dysteleological and atheistic with no plan or purpose whatsoever.
So basically what you're saying to me, Denis, is that God has waited around for about 3 billion years, and we finally got to the point of man. And man is the final expression of evolution. And once man, those first 2 people that we're going to call man, human beings.
Wait, no, not 2 people, that first population.
That first population, they are going to be the chosen ones, and they are going to be the only animals that are going to be allowed to go to heaven. So what you're saying is this whole shit show that's gone on for 12.8 billion years has been to get us to the point where us, man, has finally been here, and now God wants to congregate us into heaven to live with us?
You're being too cynical and sarcastic.
No, I'm not, Denis. I'm saying
God of love.
What is the difference between us and an elephant, us and a dolphin, or us as a bonobo monkey? They're very, very hierarchical. They're very family oriented. They have love. They have structure, as in, like I explained to you, that if a dolphin murders, he will be murdered. Where did we get to the point that man, because we evolved this brain to be self-aware and to realize that we are the shit, when did we get to the point to think that we are God's chosen ones, and that everything, the billions and billions of other animals that have come and gone, they have evolved, they have gone extinct? Why are we the ones, me and you, that were born into this religion of 4,000 years? Well, actually, it's about 2,000 years that we can go back and find proof for Christianity. Why are we the chosen ones?
Because if you were God, Mark, that's what a God does. God makes decisions. And instead of sort of railing it, I think the proper response is utter gratitude.
But I'm not.
I know you're not. I'm telling you what the way I look at it.
Honestly, Denis, I feel like that man has so far to go. We have so much understanding to still realize. We've got so much more to understand. I honestly feel that man today in 2020 is still very superstitious. We are still very much in fear of what we don't understand. And I honestly feel that what pushes people like me, scientifically minded people like me that are constantly searching the internet for answers, pushes people of religion to look into simple answers. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we are the beings that God would want sitting in clouds with us. I don't know why
Well, you know, you're giving me a really good Christian argument in the sense that we've all fallen short of what God wants us to be. That's Romans. And, you know, as you were talking there, you talk about there's more for us to do type thing. I mean, you give me an argument for heaven. I think that's what we're going to continue to develop. We're going to learn. Heaven's going to be absolutely mind-blowing. And at the same time, there's going to be this unbelievable sense of peace and joy and love. I mean,
but is that not very immature way to look at things? Like you hear of again, oh God, we're going to bring his name up again, but Kent Hovind, he always talks about this time back in the day when people would die in their sleep and it would be a peaceful death. Like, is this not something that man has always yearned for? Is this utopia of easy death, of easy times, that we get to pass away in our sleep, that things are easy, that there is an easy answer for complex decisions? Is this not something that we have always hoped for? I think it is in man's it's in our makeup. Like, honestly, I am the most staunch of atheist, Denis, and yet I find myself in times of worry saying, God, you know something, I don't know where it comes from. I don't know where it comes from, but you say to yourself, God, you know something, if you can help me with my daughter, please help me. Please help me through this situation. Is this not just
but
something?
look at, hold it. You as a staunch atheist should not be saying, and I'm going to use your word, shit like that. Which, by the way, Tammy, it's a good biblical word. It's scubala. It's in Philippians 3:8. I consider all things scubala.
The thing is,
what I gained in Christ.
Denis, is you're an extremely honest Christian.
Oh,
I am an extremely...
I'm not the only guy. There's lots of us.
I haven't run across very many of them. You're the first I've run across. And my wife, Tammy, don't get me wrong. And
all right, stop for a second.
I'm a very honest
You know what
atheist.
Christians are? They're the temple of the Holy Spirit. You want evidence for God's existence? She's right beside you. You're gonna trip over the evidence if you don't look clearly. God has graced you with a woman who believes.
But has he? He has.
I would say yes.
Okay. Yes, you're gonna get me in trouble here.
Oh, I know. I see the couch, and I see which couch you're gonna sleep on tonight.
Yeah.
Here's the facts. There's 7 billion of us on Earth, and we could go back to the chances of me meeting Tammy. Yes, they're unusual, and yes, she is a Christian. But at the same time, she has grown up with a lot of beliefs, and I don't talk to her a lot about her specific beliefs, but I know she is now struggling with some of the beliefs that she was born with and she was raised with and she was taught. And they are young.
Look at I empathize. She was influenced by the Hovind gang. I mean, it's fundamental. It's called fundamentalism, and it's really harsh. And I really question that form of spirituality. And you see, part of my job, because teaching I had an opportunity to go to a high-end university and only have PhD students, but my heart really is for undergrads. And many of the students in my class come out of that background like Tammy. And in particular, many of them want to go to medical school or dental school, and they've got to go through the biology faculty. And they're seeing all the evolutionary. The evidence today is so clear, it's unbelievable. And so these young people are compartmentalized. Sunday morning's over here. University 5 days a week is over here. And we all do this. We all go into a bit of a cognitive dissonant state when we can't fully put all the pieces together. But what happens as the process continues is, because the people in the churches are not helping them out to sort of say, this is how we can look at this issue of evolution, they end up making, I think, a terrible, though I will say, understandable decision where they walk away from faith. And the stats are on my side. Young people are leaving the church in record numbers and at a record speed right now. The standard numbers, 59% of evangelicals are basically done by the time they're 15 years of age. Now, here's the thing that I find stunning, and this is a condemnation on the church. Now, we got a nasty virus kicking around this planet right now. Could you imagine if we had a virus that was destroying 59% of young people? The medical community would be snapping and going crazy to try to stop this. Where is the Christian community in terms of responding to the 59% of these kids that are losing their faith? You know, I hear lines like, well, I'll pray for you type things, or I'll pray for these people. No. You got to fix this problem. And they do, well, number one, they don't have the skill set to fix this problem. Number two, they don't have the courage to fix this problem. And so, ergo, that's why the Tammys of the world are losing their faith very young. They've been packaged.
I wouldn't say Tammy's losing. She's not losing her faith. Like I said, Denis, and again, live chat, stay positive. I have always said to her, Tammy, I will never try to take away your faith in a God, because God is the point that I can't argue. I can't go there. I have no proof for or against a God. I can tear apart young earth creationist beliefs.
Yeah, but look at Mark, you've been doing this for almost 2 hours. Don't tell me you don't go there. You go there, and I'll tell you go really at a pretty high level.
I really don't. I don't know if there is a place for a God. And I've asked you, where do I put God? The religions of the world and our beliefs and the way that we've dreamed up all these, you showed it at the beginning. I said that to Kent Hoban. I said, Kent, of course they believed that we were formed of the waters of the earth. You dug a hole on a beach, there was water. We understood that. Back in the days, 2,000 years ago, they would have dug a hole and go, man, why is there water down here? This must be, where did this rain come from? You explained it at the beginning. We didn't understand things, so we created a God, or we explained things to the best of our ability of what we understood. But today we're at 2020. We're about 100 years or about 150 years into really understanding what's going on. So now we are to the point where we've tore all that shit apart. It doesn't even exist anymore, Denis. Where do we fit God in? Is it just in the last little holes? And I really hate to say this because it sounds like I haven't been listening to you for the last hour, but I have. But I still haven't found a spot for God. Is it that we finally evolved into the image of God? Really? We waited around for 3.5 billion years since.
But Mark, I gave you a reason why God used the evolutionary process. Because if he would have created in a young earth creationist manner, and we go do all the dating and the radiometric dating, and it doesn't go beyond 6,000 years old, we would be proving God. And the issue of faith would go off the table. The other thing the fossil record would show was all living organisms would be right down at the bottom, and humans and dinosaurs would be at the bottom. I mean, because God created everything at the same time, but that is not what the fossil record shows. If that's what the fossil record showed, there'd be no faith. In fact, we'd be teaching young earth creationism in all universities.
Thank God we're not.
Well, hold on.
Someone on the chat line just said, Mark doesn't want there to be a God. Why would I not want there to be a God? If there is a place for Mark to go that is sitting on a cloud, and I get to live out my eternity with this woman, why, I ask you, would I not want to go there. It's not a matter of want. It's not a matter of sin. I am not a sinner. I'm a very honest person. I live with a Christian. She will tell you that in a lot of cases, I have stronger morals than her. It's not that. There is no conspiracy from the atheist side where we want to sin or we want to hate or we want to deny God. It is not that. We are just honest with ourselves, and we can't find a spot to put God. That is really it, Dennis. And I had hoped tonight that when we were done, you would be able to say to me, Mark, here is where we put God. We put him right here. If it wasn't for this, this wouldn't have happened. And I haven't heard that yet. I honestly
I'm not sure. I'm not sure
it.
what you're asking me. I'm not sure what that this
I'm
wouldn't
asking
happen.
you, why would none of this have happened without God? And why is it that 5.54 billion years went by and God finally evolved us to the point where we are made in the image of God?
Okay.
Do you believe,
Mark,
that this face, just give me a second, Dennis, do you believe that this face was made in the image of God? Am I the image of God? Is this the ultimate hope of evolution? To come up with me and you, men with nipples, men with hairy chests and hairy backs, men with cancer, men with crooked teeth, men with facial hair. Are we the final hope of what God was waiting for to say, okay, you are finally the group of people that are allowed to come to heaven?
The answer is yes. And when it comes to the image of God, it's not a physical thing, it is a spiritual thing. So if you want a sense of who God is, have a look at yourself. There's many elements of you, obviously muted. God is the infinite, holy creator. We're finite, sinful human beings. But, for example, things like relationality between humans. God is relational. God, from a Christian perspective, is a trinity of three persons in a relationship. God, and that was the one thing about the creation account. God is a creator. We have that amazing creative impulse, and there's no other creature close to us. Now, that's not to diss them. It's to say we have this, and that's a fact. All you have to look around the planet. I mean, God called all the universe, or all the world, including dolphins and elephants, very good, but they don't have the image of God. So yes, am I offering a very anthropocentric view of humanity? The answer is sure. Because when it comes to a disteleological worldview, we're no different than, say, the molecules in the arborate on the desk I just tapped on. But that's a belief. So when it comes to the image of God, you have the image of God. You are indeed special. You are unique. And here's the thing. Despite you being an atheist, and I mean, you know how I feel about you, I think the world of you. I mean, you are created in the image of God, and that demands me as a Christian to respect that and to honor that and to build that up. You are the image of God. But that is a biblical statement. That is a faith statement.
And that's, Dennis, why I really appreciate you. You are honestly the first person of faith that I have ever spoke to, that I have ever stood back and said to myself, wow, this man is honest. Me and him could have a really good discussion. And that's where we are tonight. We're an hour and 45 minutes into this. I'm scared to death that James is going to cut us off, because I still feel like we're about halfway through it. So I hope he allows us to indulge in continuing this on. But again, I say to you, so Denis, you must be saying to me, okay, we're 3.54 billion years into this planet existing. So God set up this planet. 500,000 years after the planet existed, he put single-celled life on this earth. We're here today.
Well, no, he didn't put, there was no event to put single cells. This was the amazing thing, starting from the Big Bang, that everything would self-assemble. This is a self-assembling creation. I don't buy any of this God of the gap stuff. I mean, this is a historical argument that many Christians, when they get in sort of caught in a corner, they can't understand something, they have a divine intervention. History has shown that every time a religious person's had that intervention, it's been a gap in knowledge, not a gap in nature. So to me, I look at the creation. I think it's absolutely stunning that here we are able to have this conversation, that we have these brains with 100 trillion synaptic connections. I mean, and you want to talk about rolling the dice. I mean, I'd be really suspicious if you think all the rolling the dice, that brain is just a freak of nature. I think that.
But you, Denis, okay, but for one thing, let me answer the live chat. No, Tammy is not depressed. Tammy is sitting here and she,
depressed?
No, that apparently you look depressed. Tammy
she's not
is
depressed.
listening in. Tammy is a person who wants to understand. Believe me, she is not the kind of girl who wants to just believe things on faith. So let me ask you, you were honestly of the belief that we went through, okay, 5-4, let's just leave it at 5-4. So we'll give 400 or 500 million years for man to evolve. Is this it? So we've got an end. We have come to man and man is it, because we have proven that elephants have a very, very strong communal understanding of each other. They go back, they honor their dead yearly on their treks across Africa. I don't know if you realize this or not, but right now in my backyard, I have 12 big cats. So I have lions and tigers in my backyard.
What,
yeah,
really?
Well, yeah, I do. And believe me, in sitting back and watching their hierarchical and their how they present themselves, I hate to say this, Denis, I do not feel superior around them. I have a superior mind, maybe because of the way we can communicate, but honestly, physically, there's no comparison to me or a lion. They could kill me in a minute. Health-wise, no comparison. I have been sick 10 times since I've had most of these lions and tigers, and not once have I seen one of them sick. They are healthier than me. They are more physically evolved than me. There is a lot of things about these lions and tigers that are far, far beyond what I consider myself evolved to. I have a mind that allows me to consider some of the deeper thoughts of
listen, you're answering your own question here.
The only thing,
they're in a cage,
Dennis,
they're in a cage, you're not.
Let me say this last bit. You've talked more than me, and I'm good with that.
Okay.
You're a PhD, and I'm not. That gives you 75% of the conversation, just in the fact you have more schooling than me. But the only thing that I feel superior over my tigers and lions is the fact that I have this inherent belief that I have this thought process. I have this understanding that is beyond them. But at the same time, when I sit there with them, it's almost like I can't understand them. And I really hope people in the live chat aren't going to go, wow, where's Mark heading? But you have to sit with these majestic creatures. They really do have a hierarchy between each other. They have a social justice between each other. There's a lot of things there that I see that's very equivalent to man, but it's more on an animal-centric understanding.
I'll just
ask you a simple question, Denis.
Okay.
Are we it? as man. So in a billion years, I think you'll agree with me that man is not going to look like me and you today, or at least I hope they don't. Don't get me wrong, you're a good-looking man, Dennis.
Yeah, no.
But are we going to look like this? Is this the final hope? Is there a rapture coming? Is this the end of it?
Jesus could come again tonight. I mean, we don't know the time or the day. It could happen tonight. But here's the thing that we have to prepare ourselves, and it's CRISPR-9 and it's genetic modification and engineering. That's going to be the next major wave, and I'll say science and religion challenge of what do we do with all this technology. Now, I think there's something really great about it because we can eliminate some diseases. Think of cystic fibrosis. Sometimes it's a point mutation. It would be great to change that tissue in patients like that. But you know, are we going to be here for another million years? I have no idea. Could end tonight. We could figure out tonight whether there's another side, Mark.
We are the be all and end all of evolution.
Yeah, but I don't take that statement to say it's anything special because of me. I will say this is a gift that was given to me. I didn't create myself. God created me, and God gave me this status. So I think the proper response is, thank you. I'm so grateful for this. And, you know, think about your majestic cats. They're not having this discussion as we are tonight. And I think this discussion is much more enjoyable and fruitful than, you know, them sitting out there in their cages and stuff.
Well, for starters, they're not in cages. They're in very large enclosures, and there's the very good lives. Please don't say that. We have a lot of problems with animal rights activists. But at the same time, okay, so what we have done, Dennis, is we, as a group of eukaryotes, as we've gotten to the point where we have become very self-aware. Would you agree with that?
Oh, totally.
Okay, so we are probably at this point the ultimate, as far as biological beings concerned, we are probably the most self-aware.
Yes, I'd agree with that. You know,
so do you not think
there might be beings elsewhere in the universe that are more self-aware than us or more developed than us, but
oh my God, Dennis, are you gonna give me aliens?
Yeah, sure, that's a possibility. I don't know, but that's a possibility. And
okay,
here's the thing, Mark. If they show up with
James,
if they show up,
if James, we need another 2 hours here. So we're booking this in till 12 o'clock. Because I didn't think in a million years that Denis would give me aliens. So my God, and I will use the word God, Denis, how do aliens play into this?
I don't know what the answer is. Mark, I don't know what the answer is. Here's the thing.
What happens if there's a more evolved group of aliens? Are they the chosen ones, or are we going to put us all together on the clouds?
Mark, you got to realize that theology has its basic core beliefs, but theology also develops. And I'll give you an example that when they crossed, you know, the Atlantic Ocean and found indigenous people in North America, you know, the debate was, who are these people? Are they in the image of God? So let's say there are aliens. I'm not saying there are, but you know that there's a you know, it's a reasonable possibility. I mean, the one thing that would really catch me is if they were carbon-based, you know, a DNA type molecule, because if that's the case, then you start to get really suspicious that nature, given the right conditions, will evolve. So in other words, we're not just freakish flukes of nature. Rather, the way the universe is set up, that given the proper conditions, life will emerge. Anyway, let's say they are. I assume they came here, they'd be advanced in terms of technology. Let's hope they're graceful. And if they were, I mean, one of the first things I'd go chasing, where are the philosophers and the theologians? Let's sit down. I want to learn what you guys, what they've thought of through their eons of time, and same with us. I mean, so maybe there's going to be a revolution. Is their understanding of God a God of love? I mean, I would find that a pretty curious coincidence. So I don't know what the answer is. I mean, the one thing though, look at in the last 5 or 6 years, there's been this explosion of exoplanets of, up to I think up to 5,000 right now. At one time we thought this was pretty rare, having planets around suns, but actually it's very, very common. So that there should be life, maybe even intelligent life elsewhere, that doesn't faze me. That's just, history moving along. And yeah, we'll have to rethink some of our theology maybe.
I would go out on a branch and I would honestly say to you, Denis, if you were to take water and put it anywhere in the universe and give it enough time, eventually amino acids would produce themselves into RNA, DNA, and into simple celled, just like they did here. I have no doubt that would happen. Do I have proof for it? Absolutely. Take a look at Earth. We have extremophiles that have proven that they can live in places that we would have never thought that they could live. The chances of that, if we head out to Europa, that we're going to drill down through the ice and find life, we are really sure that we may find life there. But the fact is that is just a piece of dust or a grain of sand next to our grain of sand in a world, a absolute Earth full of sand. We are going to find life wherever we look. And if we don't find it there, it's just because it hasn't happened yet. We are sure that we have found life, and the reason that life takes hold is not that mysterious. And what a lot of people don't realize is that, you got the young Earth creationists that talk about the Urey,
Miller experiment.
They kept that experiment going. They didn't throw it away. And about 15 years ago, they went back and they looked at it. Me and you talked about this. Yep. It has actually worked its way along. Now, it's only been 40 years, but my God, it has worked its way along. They didn't just take that pile of garbage, sludge, whatever they found at the bottom and throw it away. They just put it aside, and it has evolved, and it is working its way towards a more complex
well, look, it's still a long ways away. And when it comes to, origin of life studies, that's still a wide open field.
But is that not what would we expect that, Denis? Honestly, would we expect that it's still a long way away?
Well,
we gave Earth
I'm just citing the
500 million years we gave it for the first cell.
Mark, I'm just citing the literature of the guys who work in the origin of life stuff. It's still a wide open debate. I don't think there's an intervention. I mean, a lot of religious people say there's an intervention to create the first cell. If anyone's done enough biochemistry and physical chemistry, you start thinking about this is an amazingly difficult problem. And part of the problem is, what are those early conditions that induce this? And so you have wide variety of views. It's a real, to me, it's a really exciting field. Who knows if they'll even find answers, say, in our lifetime? I don't know. This is and when I say it's a problem, it's a great academic problem.
But you'll agree with me, Denis, right? That these problems cannot be viewed in lifetimes. When you look at the evolution of biological things, you cannot look at them in lifetimes. So me and you,
I agree.
We are very similar in age. I'm 51. I think you told me you were 61.
65.
65. our lives seem very long to us. A lot could have happened in those years, but the evolution of life is a very, very slow process, and we know that. So we can't keep saying to ourselves, dogs become dogs. Yes, dogs will always produce dogs
in our lifetime.
But at the same time, how long can we go down a road where we exclude a species onto, let's say, a continent on their own, where they will not continue to evolve to the point where they become unrecognizable as a dog? And like I said to Kent, and the other guy I baited.
He's so obsessed with Kent.
Great, but my God, you gotta keep going back to him. You gotta say, Kent, yes, dogs become dogs, but please tell me, what is the difference between a cat and a dog? And Dennis, I'm gonna make this easy for you. The only difference that I can tell you between a cat and a dog is a cat has retractable claws. That is the only difference between a cat and a dog. They both have names that are 3 digits long. D-O-G-C-A-T. Beyond that, retractable claws. A cat and a dog are very, very similar. They both have tails. They both have fur. They both are 4-legged. They are both digigate. They are both canines. It goes on.
Well, their dentitions are very similar. I mean, that's all I know about the two.
Exactly. They are identical. And why did cats bring on this ability to retract their claws? It is because cats are very good at tearing their meat apart with their claws. So they dig in, and through evolution, they realize that if they continue to dig in with their claws and rip, they needed to retract them to let go, or they were stuck in the meat. And I know that sounds funny, but it is the truth. I've looked into it. I looked into where did cats' retractable claws come from? And it really did. Not a adaptation. It wasn't a benefit for their claws to stay out like dogs for traction. It became very good for them to be able to retract them and walk on just the pads.
I couldn't quite hear you there, Mark.
Is the difference between a dog and a cat is that, you got retractable claws. That really is it. And that's the funny thing is you start looking in, what's the difference between us and a bonobo, ape? What's the difference between us and an ape? And I really don't see the difference. You got a mustache. That means you shaved off the rest of your facial hair. Normally, you still have a full head of hair. Your hair would hang down to your butt if you hadn't cut it off. I really don't see the difference between me and you and an ape.
Well, we are apes to start off with, and there is a radical difference. There's no apes tonight having this discussion.
Are you sure?
It ain't happening.
Are you sure?
I'm absolutely certain. Because if there were such apes, wanting to communicate, then they would certainly find ways to communicate with us. In the same way we ran into indigenous people, did not know their language, but eventually we figured it out.
So
there's no other creature that communicates like we do.
So you're
bear the image of God, Mark.
You're basically saying to me that our ability to become God's chosen ones were the fact that we can communicate these, what do we want to call these? These spiritual beliefs? Is that what we're going to end it with?
Well, we do have spiritual beliefs, and religion is a universal amongst humans. I mean, that we know sociologically, and that's pretty different than the rest of the creatures on this planet. And there's no evidence that they have that same spirituality.
Except for elephants.
Well, the elephants and the issue of, they're dead and stuff like that. Maybe there's some modest something or other. I don't know enough about these elephants.
Well, I'll tell you about them just a little bit, just so you know. Elephants continually go back and honor their dead. So they are one of the few animals on Earth, including monkeys, apes. They honestly recognize their dead. So for example, if I lose a lemur, I have many lemurs too. If
What do you guys live on? You live at a zoo?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, we own a zoo.
Literally.
Yeah, we
seriously,
own a zoo.
No, seriously.
Yeah, we do. We have lots of animals. That's what I do. I do movie work with lions and tigers. So I am a lion and tiger trainer, and that's what I do. So I get lions.
I didn't know that.
Let's spend 2 minutes talking about this, just so everybody
So I got
understands.
a choice between going to Ken's Adventure World or Mark and Tammy's zoo. Well, you know where I'm going.
There is a big difference. We are different than anyone else in the world. So what we do here is I have lions and tigers that are so trained, they're like dogs. So what you can do is you can walk in with them. So any other animals except for the ones, so my lions and tigers are seen on Disney, they're seen on IMAX, they're seen on National Geographic. Yes.
Really?
If you've ever seen a lion or tiger on TV, it is mine. And the reason is because we've gotten to the point where animal rights people didn't want animals to be seduced, or not sedated to the point where they could be taken on set. So what I've done, instead of sedating my animals to go on set, I have trained them to the point that they can sit there with young children, that they can sit there in a room of 100 people and act. And they do very well. So I train and tigers to be very trained. They're very friendly. They're like dogs. They really are. I look to the left here and I can see my four lions standing out there looking at me right now in my backyard.
All right, where's your home? Like in Ontario?
So I live in Grand Bend, Ontario.
Grand Bend.
Canada is one of the last places where the animal rights fringe movement hasn't really taken hold yet. So we can still use animals for movies. We can still use them for we can prove to the animal rights people that we are raising these animals in an ethical way, that they're treated well, they're not being sedated to be on movie sets, they're actually friendly enough to act with children and other actors. Wow. But that's a story way out. This is what I do. And that's the funny thing, Dennis, is I really do have this unique understanding. I may be one of the few people in the world that understand the way minds work and the way that we see danger, the way that we see friend and foe, the way that we see things. It's a little different. I think a little different. I see the way things think, and
but Mark, that shouldn't surprise you that there should be commonalities between us and, say, your animals. We have an evolutionary history. Yeah,
there's a very, very strong link in the way that an animal thinks as to the way we think. Like, for instance, I have, out of my 4 large adult lions, I have one of them that has chosen me to be her main. She thinks of me as hers. She protects me from the rest, and then I have a male that does the same thing. There's definitely a hierarchy. There's definitely this level of respect. There's definitely this level of I don't even know how to explain it, but there's a hierarchical you'd have to see it to believe it. I have a male lion that'll step in if he feels that one of the other lions is getting a little too aggressive with me. He will get between me, and it's very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Like very primeval.
Yep.
And it's so obvious to me. It just really plays into that primeval part of my brain. And maybe that's the reason that I see this type of stuff. I really feel this connection to nature, and I don't see myself as outside of the animal kingdom. I really do, Dennis, feel that we are part of the animal kingdom, and I don't feel like that. Honestly, I really have troubles thinking that we are the pinnacle of evolution. I see a lion or a tiger being so superior to us. I see that our brains have this ability to communicate. We have this ability to think things through. We have this ability to imagine things that maybe they're not, but physically.
Yeah, but Mark, look at if they were doing those things, being able to think the way we do, then I give the analogy to indigenous people that don't have the same language as us. We can eventually figure out in our communication signs to finally find a way to communicate. They've tried this, that famous experiment with Coco the gorilla. That's the best educated living organism on this planet. I mean, years and years and years trying to get Coco to talk and stuff. I mean, communicate. They definitely have a sense of being conscious. They have a sense, things like loyalty and care and stuff like that. But it's a huge gap between us and them. There's really
I don't think it is, Dennis.
No, there is no comparison.
I do. I completely disagree. When I look at a mother lion who has had a baby, the love is there. The compassion is there. Like, for example, and this is the first time I've ever admitted this publicly. So I had a female lion that had her first litter of lions. And it's very unusual for the first litter of lions to survive. Unfortunately, They got a lot to learn, and it's winter here in Canada right now. So on her last baby, she had 3. The first 2 were born still. The last one she pushed it to me to look after. She pushed it at me. She pushed it over to me. Please, please bring this baby back to life. And I couldn't. It was stillborn. She was a week and a half past her due date. She went past term and they were all stillborn. But she realized her baby was going to be born dead. And she looked to me and said, "Can you please help my baby?" And it was already dead. Yeah. And you know something? I seen this in her eyes. She looked at me with hope. And that's the way me and you look at each other right now. We look at each other with hope of, please explain to me what, and I know you've heard me say this 4 or 5 times tonight, what is this shit show all about? And if we can honestly say to each other, we don't understand, then that is an honesty that a atheist and a Christian have never met before. We can both say, "Look, Dennis, I don't know what this is about, but all I can tell you is I can't find a hole for God. I cannot see a superiority in myself over animals. I don't think we are the final hopes of evolution." And I really hope you can come back to me and say, "Mark, this is why we are the final. We are the pinnacle. We are what all this 3.5 billion years or 3.55 billion years was all about, was getting to us. And now we're here."
Well, I'll say that's true. And the reason we're here is because God wants us to be in loving relationships amongst ourselves and for us to be in a loving relationship with God. That's now, with that being said, do I know this with absolute and total certainty? The answer is no, because everyone has to take a step of faith on their worldview. Now, the fact I do what I do, obviously being a Christian theologian, and it's not like I need the money. I mean, I don't need the money. I do this because I believe this stuff. And as you believe, so shall you walk. Could I all be wrong on this? The answer is yes. Inversely, the atheist has to say the very same thing. They might be wrong in terms of their atheism. And it's like that technical term I gave you, eschatological verification. The only way we'll know if there's a life after death is if we show up on the other side. And if there is no other side, it really doesn't matter now, does it?
Denis, are you okay with the idea that this is it?
Oh, well, I'm sure. I mean, here's, and you're not the routine atheist. A lot of atheists say that they're the only logical thinkers in the whole bit. I'm
not a logical thinker. Here's what I'll say to you as an atheist. For me, what the word atheist means is I wasn't here in 1967. I was here in 68. In 2068, I will no longer be here, and I'm okay with that. I really am. I don't need to believe that because I was born, that gives me an automatic place in a heaven that I really don't want.
Okay,
I don't think I'm comfortable.
I'm going to try to answer this in a circular sort of way and see if this makes sense. I'm 65 years of age. I'm a lot closer to death than you are. And I never think about my death. For me, Christianity is what it does for me right now. Now, as a Christian to believe in eternal life and that stuff, yeah. I mean, is there a sense of peace that I'm going to enjoy eternity? Yeah, but I rarely think and focus about that. I mean, I gave you the mention that this past year, this blood vessel that showed up in my head really constricted. I'm probably going to die of a stroke. Do I worry about that? Not really, other than to say, I've set things up so, whatever finances I have will be doing good things. I'm just not going to create a bunch of trust fund babies and stuff like that. So to me, I just don't think of the afterlife. I mean, when I think of it, like tonight we talk about what's heaven like. I think heaven's going to be beyond Star Trek. I mean, it's going to be so unbelievably cool. But I don't.
But isn't that, Denis, is that not a very, very standard way to think? Like, I would honestly believe in heaven more if you were to say to me, when we get to heaven, we got a job. We got a lot of shit to take care of. It's going to be a rough place, but we got a lot to do when we're there.
Think about how much you enjoy these ideas and thinking about this stuff. I mean, I do this for a living. This is a little slice of what heaven's going to be like. You're not going to be bored. As I said, if you show up on a cloud with a harp, you're probably not in heaven, probably in hell. I mean, who would want to spend eternity twanging a harp? I mean,
exactly.
That's just that's a perverted understanding of heaven. So I think what we experience here, for example, the experience of love, the experience of peace, the experience of joy, the experience of love of our neighbors, and for people who are religious, the love of God. I think this is going to magnify as we as heaven unfolds.
And do you think animals don't feel that as well? Do you not think my
I don't know. Here's the question: do animals go to heaven? I don't have an answer for that, and it's just. Is something that doesn't show up on the radar theologically. Now, in popular circles, a lot of people say their dogs coming to heaven and stuff like that. I mean, would that faze me? Not in the least. I mean, I don't have an answer. I don't have an opinion, and I don't know where the information is for that.
And you're not sure where the cutoff point is going to be, where all of a sudden God is going to consider apes to be man.
I don't know. No, I don't. I I have no idea. And I don't know
But you gotta admit to me, Denis, that it really would suck if you're that 1/8 before the one that is the chosen one.
Chosen eight.
And as you cough, and as we struggle through life, and as we deal with parasites, and as we deal with flus, and as we deal with science obviously has given us vaccines that can take care of smallpox. It can take care of some of the worst things that man has ever seen.
Yep.
Can we really say that we are the final hope of what God had set evolution into place? Honestly, Denis, I really don't think you've answered, to me anyways, to my satisfaction tonight, why it is that we are the chosen ones. Why did we make it?
I've answered that. I can only answer that theologically. That God created us in his image, and we're the only creatures in his image. And it now becomes a question of whether you accept revelation or not. And there's a time where it's all going to end. That's the consummation. Those are all religious, and watch the word I'm going to use, religious beliefs. Those religious proofs, the only proof you're going to have is if indeed there's life after death, the eschatological verification. And we can only wait and see what happens.
And you see, for me, Denis, I just don't know why there would be. I don't know what about me makes me special over any other species on this earth. I don't see us as physically stronger. Mentally, obviously, we were born with the digits on our hands. We were born with the ability to think. We were born with
but don't downplay that. I mean, that's the radicality, and that's part of this term image of God and creating the likeness of God. So you have a little taste of what God is like in your very being. And so, and I think this is radical. I mean, archaeologically, there's no other creature that compares to us.
Mentally.
Well, mentally, intellectually, spiritually, rationally, boy, that's some pretty important stuff. Now, there's no doubt your tigers could chew us up in minutes.
They could kill us in seconds.
Oh yeah.
Physically, we may be one of the weakest animals on earth. Honestly, Denis, and I don't mean this disrespectfully to anyone, we may now have evolved to the point where we're one of the weakest biological.
Mark, why did it go in that direction? It's because there was no selective pressure. It's because this thing got really, really big. And as that thing got really, really big, we had new strategies to survive. And the fact that we have basically filled up this planet with people just speaks of that ability. We're in a league by ourselves. Anyway, I'm starting to get tired here. I'm starting to float. We've been doing this for 2.5 hours.
I don't even know how to answer that, Denis. Like, me and you are honestly to the point where we're both so honest with each other that it's hard to knock each other's down. We both have really good points, and I don't mean that arrogantly. What I mean is, yes, I understand what you're saying, but at the end of the day, Denis, I don't know what it is about man that has evolved to the point where you can say, okay, you as an old earth Christian believes that now we are 4.54 billion years into this, we made it. Because man, the way we look at man today, me and you, we're only about 250 million years old. Why? Yeah. What is it about us that's so special? Why are we the ones? Why is it not us in another, say, 100,000 years that has evolved far beyond me and you in technology? Why are they not God's chosen ones? Why are we the ones?
because maybe there is a God, and maybe God gifted us with that unicity, that unique characteristic, the likeness and the image of God. And those are not scientific things, those are spiritual things.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do James a favor here. I'm going to spend about a minute and I'm going to sum this up.
All right.
So at the end of the day, Denis, what I can say to you, and because you went first, I'm also going to let you go last because I respect you so much. I honestly think you're a very good man. I understand what you're saying. I believe that you are out for honesty. I really do. I think that at the end of the day, if anything came along that would change your mind, you would accept it. You have accepted so much that has flown in the face of religion. You have accepted evolution. You have accepted the age of the earth. You have accepted so much. You have gone so far to accept so much towards the way that, say, I don't want to say atheist because I don't even know what to call myself at the end of the day, but you have accepted so much that I really do respect you. And I know it's hard sometimes to go against what the Old Testament says. And now you're to the point where honestly, you're going even against the New Bible, the King James. A lot of the stuff in there, you're going a little bit against it as well, with it being, 2,000 years old or whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, me as an atheist, all I can say is at the end of the day, we don't see what is so special about us that allows us to think to ourselves that we are the be all and end all of of anything, of evolution or God's creation. If he has put evolution in place to produce us, I don't see us as being there yet. And that's about a minute. And then I'm going to let you take it away, Denis. And all I can say is thank you so much for the conversation. I've learned a few things. I'm going to go back. I'm going to think a lot about this. And I'm going to ask the people out there as atheists to continue to think this stuff through. You can't just cling to your idea as being fact. You need to think things through. Denis is a very intelligent man. Think of the things that he said tonight and think it through. And all we're looking for is, at the end of the day, we're looking for honesty. Where do we belong on this little ball floating around in this huge universe that is enormously old, that we can't even consider the age? And that's all I ask of everybody.
Well, that's a great way to conclude. And I had about 5 minutes after the Kent Hovind discussion talking with Mark, and I knew immediately this is a guy that if we're in the same town, we'd share pops on Friday nights together, most likely. Which, by the way, that's Canadian for beer. And I really value your honesty and your intensity. I mean, I love your intensity because you love these ideas, and that's a hugely important thing. How to describe faith? Faith is simply falling in love with God. In the same way when you fell in love with Tammy, I mean, is there a formula? Well, there isn't really a formula. It's one of these things that happens, and part of it is by grace. And that's part of my story is by grace. And I hope we can contact. I hope we can do some of these things again. It's really been a pleasure. And next time in Ontario, I want to come and see all your cats. I mean, that was a big revelation tonight. Oh man, mind you might want to feed me to the cats. Anyway, James, Tammy, Mark, this has been a blessing. Thank you so much for the conversation. And Mark, we're going to do it again. We'll find some topic and maybe spin some ideas and see where we can go with that. But I've been really blessed with this conversation. And by the way, remember what I said, I'm not a prophet, but I guarantee that this would be a very healthy discussion, and nothing like the first time I was on this with Kent. And indeed, this was a very healthy conversation and very enlightening and very enjoyable. And I'm so grateful Tammy was there. It was great to see her. So thanks very much, you guys. And thanks, James.
And you know something, Denis?
What's that?
Unlike the followers of Kent, us atheists will not go on your Wikipedia page and put up stuff that is disrespectful. We are very respectful people, and that's what I love about my community. And I hope you can reflect on yourself and say that the people that back you are the same. They have that same integrity that atheists have. All we're after is truth. We're not after hate.
I agree.
And none of the people on this chat are going to go out and put things on your Wikipedia page. We are going to end this conversation, and you know something? Let's let James now make a little bit of money, and let's let him ask us some questions, and that's how he now pays the bill. So go ahead, James. Let's have some of the live chats come through, and we'll answer them the best we can.
It's not quite how I pay the bills. Someday I hope to go full-time YouTube, though. It is really fun. So thanks so much for your questions, folks. We're going to try to fly through as many as we can. Got a lot of questions. I honestly, never expected it to go this long, but it was hard to stop because it was just sometimes.
James, we lost you.
I didn't expect it to go this long, but sometimes I get into a state where I'm just enjoying it so much that I honestly could sit forever. And this is one in which I was like, I could sit and I honestly don't even feel exhausted yet. I feel great. Like I could keep going for a long time yet, but I know that you guys want to get to sleep at some point. So thanks for your question. First one from, as she calls herself, Stupid Whore Energy. She says,
I love her. Thank you, Super Whore Energy. I have noticed your name every single time. Take it away.
Mark's version, Super Whore Energy. She says, Denis, what do you think of the selfish genes which spread due to mechanisms such as killing 50% of the offspring that do not have a copy of it, but cause harm to the larger organism?
Well, here's the one thing about the selfish gene hypothesis, and of course we know where it comes from. It comes from Richard Dawkins, and there's been a response to the selfish gene thesis. What's the name of the guy? Franz de Waal in The Age of Empathy, and which, by the way, de Waal is also an atheist. And what de Waal points out is, there's no doubt about it. We do have some selfish tendencies, but to talk about selfish genes aren't selfish. Genes just basically replicate. They're just simply chemistry. So here we are as creatures. Do we have, and I love de Waal's image and metaphor. He says that humans walk on two legs. One is a selfish one, no doubt about it, but another one is a social one and an empathetic one. So de Waal comes to the conclusion, and of course he's a primatologist, and he goes through the mammals over 200 million years to suggest, as we have this tendency going both ways, whereby we can be compassionate at the same time we can be selfish. And I think that's basically the human condition that shows up the moment humans become humans. So the element is there. Now, with that being said, I'll take my evolutionary psychology and now cast it from a Christian perspective. And we've seen this type of language in scripture. We talk about the flesh, or sarx in Greek. That would be the selfishness component. And Paul talks about it quite openly. He says, "Oh, wretched man am I," because he's the flesh is always tugging on him. But at the same time, Paul recognizes what he calls the law in people's hearts, the sense of consciousness and conscience. So as a Christian, what I do, looking at myself having these two elements, is follow Paul's admonition to remodel our minds, and we know neuroplasticity is part of our brains. And he uses the language, clothe yourself with Jesus, clothe yourself with Christ. And so part of the Christian walk with my evolutionary body is for me to raise up those compassionate and empathetic elements. I recognize there's going to be a selfish component, and part of that selfish component had some utility in my own survival. But at the same time, being within the context we are, is to try to suppress the selfishness, uphold the empathetic side of things. And as I said, this all comes from a guy who's also an atheist. So he's taken Dawkins to task pretty intensely.
All I can say to you, Denis, is if you answer these questions that long all night, you're never going to get to bed. Because I've watched them.
The thing is, it's such a great question. I mean, it's almost impossible not to answer it, because it's in many ways.
Better, Mark.
I know. I am a talker. So here's the deal on that answer for me. Even though, I know that was towards Denis. I think that the way we think, that is exactly it. Atheists are not selfish. We do not believe we are the be all and end all of evolution. And I'll end it at that.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. Appreciate that. Next up, Carmel Crunk, thanks for your super chat. She asks, why is it that most Christians don't believe in evolution?
Well, because the church has not done a good job. And think about Tammy's story, being raised as a young earth creationist. And, she said something, it was very subtle, but it just rang in my ears tonight, where she basically said it's only recently she's realized there's more than just two positions. That really, I'll dare say, is a condemnation of the church for not educating Christians in the pews. Because there's more than just one position on origins for Christians. And as you saw at the beginning of the episode, I gave you the three basic ones. And of course, there's always variance within each and every one of these classes. So the bottom line, the church has failed the people in the pews. And you might be interested. I'm an evangelical Christian. I go to a Pentecostal church. It is thanks to the Catholic Church I have a job. Because when it comes to the two denominations, colleges in town that I've been associated with, they won't touch me. So if they won't touch me, how are these young pastors going to go out and teach the Tammys of the world? They're not.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. And if you want to respond as well, Mark, you're welcome to.
No, I'm good with that. That's pretty much, like I said, Denis and I line up on 95% of what there is to be said about this stuff.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. Next up, Dwayne Burke, thanks for your super chat. They said, Mark, research occultism and its related literature. It will give you a very good reason to believe in God. Also research astral travel by the CIA.
Oh.
That's
for you, Mark.
So if you're familiar with
Thanks,
those.
Dennis.
You're welcome, Mark.
All I can say.
Anytime, pal. It's all yours.
All I can say to that is puppies wear slippers and sometimes they wear house coats.
Oh, God.
Thank you.
Next up, thanks so much for your super chat as well, Dwayne Burke. They said T Jump's chair for president 2020. Yes, that's funny. Okay, never mind. Okay, Serious Startups. Thanks for your super chat. They said, how did DNA information plus logic rules form?
Go ahead, Denis.
Well, it's going to become a function of ultimately your worldview. I mean, I'm a believer in a creator. I'm a believer in a creator with a rational mind. And I'm not surprised that the world is dripping with rationality. So when it comes to DNA, I think it's just part of the mind of God and the original plan. And, has set up nature in such a way. And I think this is pretty amazing that nature is self-assembling. This is a self-assembling creation. And ultimately, so when I look at evolution, I sort of see the mind of God and the hand of God in it. Not in the sense that God is bumping evolution along. I'm just looking at the laws of nature and I'm going, so clever, so cool, blows me away, never ceases to amaze me. And here's the amazing thing, as a Christian, as a scientist, the deeper I dig into nature, the more amazing it is. I never get bored. I just keep getting blown away by it.
Gotcha.
How about you? Go, Mark.
Yeah, and for me, the more I dig into it, the more I see that I can't find a spot to put God. I honestly feel, I'm 51 now. I honestly feel at 30, where science was at and where our understanding was, I could have fit a God in easier then. It's getting harder and harder for me to shoehorn him in.
You've been using that argument all night long. What I want you to do is look to your left. Look to your left. This is a vessel of the Holy Spirit. You're looking for God? God is right beside you. She is a vessel of the Holy Spirit.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. Next up, unless you wanted to respond, you can, Mark.
No, I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole.
You don't want to stay on the couch tonight.
Not unless I wanted to sleep on this couch.
Next up, thanks Serious Startups for your super chat. Oh wait, let's see. They said, how do you explain DNA duons? I don't know if this is a typo or they said
Duons are mammals, marine mammals.
Yeah.
Okay. They said, how do you explain DNA duons via evolution? Thanks so much.
Neither of us are denying evolution and the way it took place. So, take your $8 or whatever she gave you and we move on. Like neither of us are denying that evolution is where we got to today.
Yeah, I'd say duons, same sort of genetic material.
Yeah.
Obviously differences because it's a different species. But, what's evolution? It's like a tree and everything spreads out. It's an amazing tree. So.
And it's still going on today. It's just going on at a rate that that the human life, like any of us, look back to when we were children, even if you're only 30 years old, it seems like eternity ago. You got to remember, you are looking at time frames that are unimaginable to the human mind. We cannot fathom these types of times. And that's really what it comes down to. We cannot fathom what 1 billion years is. We can't fathom what 1 billion of anything is.
But Mark, we're in a mass extinction right now.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We're in this, I think they say it's the 6th mass extinction.
We're in the 6th mass extinction.
That's right.
And the fact that we can actually talk about it and identify it in such a short period of time, maybe 100 years or so, that troubles me.
Troubles me too. We're on the same page.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Next up. Thanks for your question from Jay Shy. They said, Mark and Tammy, have you, so I think they didn't see that it says Christian next to Tammy's name. Come on, Jay Shy. Okay. So they said, Mark, have you checked out Inspiring Philosophy's videos? Or I guess maybe they mean for Tammy, because Inspiring Philosophy is a Christian who believes in evolution. And they say he gives great evidence for God, also regarding evolution being compatible with Christianity. I recommend reading John Walton's book on Genesis.
Well, I'll comment about John Walton. He's a very dear friend of mine. And
short and pithy comment, please.
What's that?
If you're able to make it a short and pithy comment.
Oh, really short. Just want to say definitely read what John is doing. And John is at Wheaton, which is the flagship, the evangelical flagship in the United States. And what John's doing is he's stepping away from this thing called scientific concordism and really identifying the ancient science and scripture and the ancient categories. And so John has done some brilliant work and is a leader in the community. Totally giving people permission to go in that direction.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, and as far as Tammy and I go, all we can say to anyone that is in the live chat or watching this, and we're up to about 200 people watching this, people, Tammy and I found love. We truly love each other. I am an atheist. She is a believer. We are okay with that. We will find the truth between each other. Don't be concerned. We are together. There is a love, there's a connection. And you know something? Atheism is not what people try to portray it as this hate for God. I don't hate God. I just can't find the honest spot to put him. That's all I can say. Tammy needs to find that honest spot to put him. If she's okay with that, she can grab him in. I just haven't found it yet. And all I can say is tonight's discussion, I still haven't found a spot to put him. And I really hope that Denis and James finds a way of letting us have another conversation. I feel that we're honestly only halfway through it.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. And you guys are always welcome. And Kent Hoven's CPA. However, feeling this isn't his actual accountant. They said Chiefs 42, Niners 17. Thanks for that prediction on the Super Bowl. Dwayne Burke, thanks for your super chat. They said big shout out to Denis's mustache. God bless you. Very nice.
Thanks.
Snazzy.
We read every super chat. Okay. Serious Startups, thanks for your super chat. They said, explain quantum coherence in photosynthesis via evolution.
Oh, God.
That's yours, Denis.
No, that's not mine. I'm a tooth guy. Look, when I was making the comment about the issue of molecular evolution and stuff like that, that would come under that rubric. Here's the problem of molecular evolution, in contrast to, say, what I do work on teeth. Teeth are large, teeth fossilize really well. When it comes to molecules, they just don't fossilize in the same sort of way. And so that's where there's this big gap in terms of how do these molecules self-assemble. Part of the other problem is what actually are those initial conditions? Who knows what they were? You can speculate. And as a result, this is a really tough discipline to try to make sense, molecular evolution.
You got it.
So let me ask you, Denis, as a dentist, could man have ever lived to 900 years old?
The answer, it's funny you should ask that, especially a dentist, because here's the thing about teeth, just normal wear and grind.
Yeah.
By the time anyone lives 100 years old, those teeth
They're
are
gone.
getting really, well, not gone, but they're starting to be flattened. So the other thing is, if you live 900 years, those teeth would be right flattened down. Another thing that happens within teeth as you age is inside the tooth where the pulp is, there's a set of cells right against the teeth, and they retract and come in.
Yeah.
That's called odontogenesis, secondary dentin. And so by the time someone is, 200, 300 years old, those canals should be completely obliterated.
Gone.
Right.
Yep.
Teeth are really solid. They stick in the fossil record and the archaeological record. Do we have evidence of flattened down teeth with the nerves inside all obliterated with calcium inside? And the answer is
no.
Not even close.
Gotcha.
Young Earth creationists,
right,
watching this debate tonight, this is a closed option. There is no way that a man could live to 900 years old and still be able to eat meat or any food to stay alive.
If just because there's no young Earth creationist to speak on video, if you want to extend an invitation for a debate, any young Earth creationists out there, we're more than happy to have you on and give you a chance to make your case. Stupid Whore Energy, thanks for your super chat. They said, Denis, surely you're aware of the many criticisms of ENCODE. Their definition of biochemical function, quote unquote, was dubious, and they have since admitted it.
The answer is, like every other theories, there's been some modifications on it. But to suggest that we're going to go back to 98% of DNA being total junk, that's not possible. The other thing that's going on with ENCODE and really in genetics right now, there's a debate on what exactly is a gene. I mean, the old classic one that I grew up on was one way, but they are really. ENCODE is really surprising a lot of people. And the last time I checked it was last year on their site. They're still throwing in the number at 80%. There's some type of functionality, not in a classical gene sense. For example, there's a lot of RNA transcripts that have some sort of function. So there's more to be done when it comes to ENCODE. ENCODE is a fairly new discipline in itself, and of course, it's an outgrowth from the Genome Project, that ended in 2003. So ENCODE is fairly new, and it continues to do some advances. And the other thing is, it's in some of the best laboratories and best scholars in the world. So before you start writing off ENCODE, I mean, that's almost sounded like a young Earth creationist argument. Rethink that one.
Yeah, all I can say towards that, Denis, is Super Whore Energy is definitely not young Earth creationist. And if she ever gives up that name, I am going to grab it and make it my email address.
Oh, yeah.
Give them another $1 and ask another question, Super Whore Energy. I love your name.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. Appreciate that. Dogs Over Gods, thanks for your super chat. They said, no question, just love these discussions. Keep up the great work. Well, all credit to the debaters. They are it's always great to get to listen to them. So tonight's been a really special one. And so Jay Shy, thanks for your question as well. They said, Denis, have you checked out Joshua? I want to make sure I pronounce this right.
Swamidass.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Swamidas's book.
Oh, I know Swamidass. I know of his work. Completely disagree with him.
Really?
Especially what he does to the scriptures.
Wow. All right, no problem. Well, we might be able to arrange a discussion if you guys want. Could be interesting.
Half and half for me. I really have troubles with some of the. Yeah, I have a little troubles with some of the thoughts. Half and half.
Well, the thing with Swamidass, he's a concordist. Yeah. Of course, I told him he was a concordist, and he didn't know what a concordist was, and eventually I had to define it for him. And he continues to, say that he's not a concordist. But Swamidass has an atom, and the moment you have an atom, where do you get atom from? Do you get that from the scientific record? No, you don't. No. You get the word atom from the Bible. Therefore, you are a concordist. And I don't spend much time thinking about Swamidass. That's sort of a ship that sailed a long time ago for me, and I never worry about what he has to say.
Next.
Gotcha. Thanks very much. Serious Startups, thanks for your other super chat. They said DNA-based pairs are chemically neutral. How do you explain the information bearing formation of gene sequences with no chemical reaction pattern being?
I have no idea what's being asked.
Me neither.
Yeah, I don't know what's being asked there. All I know is that if you look into the way evolution has taken place, it makes a lot of sense. If we follow the genes and then we follow the expressions of the alleles, it makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure what they're asking, and I don't want to be disrespectful. If they want to come back on with a 1 cent donation and clarify, I will try to answer that, but I'm not sure what they're asking. Thank you for asking.
Or a $10 donation.
No, 1 cent. They've already given their money.
Gotcha. Thanks for your question. Let's see. Stupid Whore Energy strikes again. She says, in terms of soul building, what do you think of passages such as Isaiah 65:17, which states we won't remember anything, so all that evil was pointless?
That's an Isaiah?
I can read the passage if you'd like.
Give me the verse again. Isaiah what?
65:17.
Well, the reason that sort of catches my attention is that was my morning devotion. And
Tammy, can you help us?
I finished Isaiah this morning. All right, Isaiah 66 what?
65:17.
65:17. Behold, I will create a new heavens and a new earth. The former things will not be remembered, nor will they come to mind. I mean, look, this is what Isaiah is doing here in this eschatological passage, is basically talking about the consummation of things. And when you talk about things that, if you go to Revelation, there'll be no tears. So I'm not sure. So, okay, so we'll forget that pain, so to speak. But the point is that I'm talking about pain in the here and now. So does pain in the here and now have some sort of spiritual benefit? Is there a silver lining in it? So the point I was talking about when it came to, the bumps and bruises in life, it's for today in terms of building. Now, of course, when we go into the eschaton, into heaven, there's going to be some changes. I mean, for one thing, we're going to have resurrected bodies, no more aches and pains, and things like we'll no more remember certain things. I think that's a good thing. I think there's some psychological trauma that people would rather not remember all through eternity.
And for me, James, the problem that I have in believing in a lot of this is many of the teachings is towards this utopia of there will be no pain, there will be no work, there will be no issues. It just seems like, and Denis, please don't take this the wrong way. I really like you. You could be my friend. It just seems really immature. It seems like a group of people really hoping for this utopia of this place that we get to go to with no pain, with no sorrows, with no disease, with no anything. And it just doesn't make sense to me. And where I'm wrong, please, people, send James $5 and ask a question. I just don't see it.
Look, it's not a question that it's not logical. It may not be true, but is there potentially a place that we don't suffer as we do here? We don't have the aches and pains. I mean, one of the echoes of the resurrected body, I mean, that seems to be an altered state. The one thing about the resurrected body, think of Jesus, we're still going to be able to eat and enjoy food. That seems to be pretty clear. So it's going to be a blessed place. And I think the most important thing is we're going to be in the presence of God's Spirit, God's love, God's peace, God's joy. So I think this will be a pretty enjoyable and peaceful place. And I think, who wouldn't want that? I mean, really?
Well, all atheists put up their hands, because I don't want it. I really don't. I don't want this place of, I have one of those minds that understand what the word eternity means. It means forever. The word billion doesn't come into place. The word trillion doesn't come into place. The word trillions of trillions is not even the beginning. We are talking eternity, people. You never get to pass away. Is that what you want?
Gotcha. Thanks for your super chat, or your super chat school account. I thought it was Jay's school account. Thank you. They said, Mark speaks in a way that makes me want to listen. The cadence is just good. I'm a younger guy and I'm inspired, Mark. So you have a fan out there, Mark.
Well, all I can say is I'm 51 years old and I'm a very young person. So I enjoy life. I live this world for what it is. I love my wife. My wife is a Christian. I don't look down on her for being a Christian. I only look down on her for some of her beliefs. These men cannot love men. That is not true. Women cannot love women. It's funny, the two of us sat in a parking lot tonight and we talked about how on a scale of 1 to 10, what is love? I have a friend named Brad. I have my brother. I love these two men. And you know something? I am not one to judge what love is. I love my wife, whether she's a Christian, whether she's an atheist. These mean nothing. I love Denis. I am one of these few atheists that are really honest with ourselves. I don't know where I belong in this universe, But at the end of the day, I really hope before I die, I understand it. And that's all I ask for. But all I can say is at the end of the day, people, when you've got your Nephilim Frees, when you've got your Ray Comforts and your Kent Hovens, these are not the same type of people that are on the same page as Denis. Denis is a very honest man. And at the end of tonight, I have more respect for him than I had even before. He's an honest man, and please think what we've said through both sides. Don't just look at this as being a decision on what's right or what's wrong. There's definitely a gray area, and we need to consider it as honest human beings.
Gotcha.
Amen.
Thanks very much. Appreciate that. And Subtracted, thanks for your question. They said, hey, Denis, why should anyone take the Bible seriously?
Because it's the word of God. How's that for a serious answer?
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
Look, this is a belief that Christians have. I mean, I have that belief. I mean, I look at the text, I read the text. There's a spirit that comes out of it. It's the inspired word of God, and it's also inspiring. And like I made the comment when the thing about Isaiah 66 came up, and I thought, what were they reading? Because I was in there this morning. That's how I start every morning. In the same way, we wouldn't think of spending a day without eating something, because our electrolytes will get all out of whack. I'm the same way when it comes to Scripture. I feed from Scripture. It keeps my spiritual electrolytes, quotation marks, in balance. And it's that's why I'm an evangelical. My theology always starts with the text first. And it's the text that really speaks to me. And that text has been speaking to me for over 40 years. I mean, that is one thing that's been totally constant in my Christian experience.
And
Gotcha.
as for me, the fact that we need to eat and metabolize food proves to me that there is no God. But I can say to you at the end of the day, Denis is a very intelligent man. Listen to what he has to say. And like I said, at the end of the day, think it through. Think about what both of us have to say, and think about what honestly resonates in your mind. Why are we here? That is at the end of the day the question. What brought us here? What has got us to this position? And one thing that I want to bring up, and I'm only going to spend about 30 seconds saying this, is atheists. We all have this inherent feeling that things are going on. We would be, like I said, afraid to sleep in a morgue. We would be afraid to sleep in an insane asylum where thousands of people have died. Don't look at Denis as being a person of unreason. There's something in our minds that really drives this home. Is it a God, or is it a proof that this is just, we're predisposed to this kind of thinking? And that's what we got to figure out at the end of the day.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Next up, let's see. Senator Fredo Sarabia in the house. Thanks for your question. He said, Denis, as a Christian following the Bible, how do you not agree, quote, whereas one man sinned, death entered the world? Wouldn't evolution make a 180? Or is the Bible true? So I think they're saying, like, isn't it the opposite in evolution?
Yeah, no. Look, what's being raised here is a really good comment. And this is one of the challenging things. I come back to the point of, does the Bible have an ancient understanding of nature? I think it has an ancient understanding of nature. It has an ancient understanding of astronomy, the firmament, the waters above. It has an ancient understanding of the origin of living organisms. Instead of evolution, everything gets created quickly and completely. And that is the technical term de novo creation. So if the Bible has an ancient understanding of the origin of life, then don't be surprised that the Bible has an ancient understanding of the origin of death. And that's where the Adam and sin death connection all come in. This is a reflection of the ancient biology. Now, the whole idea of Adam, and I think everyone can agree, no matter what their view is, Adam is, and it's a brilliant account, the Garden of Eden account. The message of Adam is Adam does not listen to God. God gives Adam and Eve Shangri-La, and Adam and Eve do not listen. And the other part of that account, which I think is so brilliant, is God, comes up to Eve and said, "What do you do?" And you notice what she does: blames the snake. It's the blame game. Then God goes up to Adam and says, "Well, what about it?" And Adam says, blames Eve, and then not only that, he says, "Eve, it's the woman that you put here with me." In other words, not only does he blame Eve, he blames God for putting Eve there. And that I see
Typical
this as
man.
a story, as an allegory, and it's the story of each and every one of us. We rationalize the heck out of some of our bad behavior. And that includes Christians. I mean, if you want to see some great rationalizers, check out Christians. They're notorious at that sort of stuff. But what is that doing? I think this is, why do I believe in the Bible? It's because when I read this in the Bible, at the beginning of the Bible, and the whole idea of having it at the beginning of the Bible is this is an important idea. It's to say to you guys, to say out to all of us, God made us, but we bite the hand that feeds us. Like, what the heck is it about our nature that we do that? And that's what the doctrine of sin is. And sin is not a really rational thing. Sin is irrational. It's the last thing you should be doing, but we all do it. That's why I believe in the Bible. It really tells us who we are.
Gotcha. Thanks.
And that's why I as well believe in the Bible. Everything that goes wrong for us is Tammy's fault. And I'm good with that.
Couch,
I get
sleeping
blamed.
on the couch.
Very biblical of you.
Next up, Joni Spinoza. Thanks for your question. They said, it's never aliens, FFS. I don't know what, so F as in Frank, F as in Frank, S as in Sally. I don't know what that abbreviation means.
Well, both Dennis and I will say yes and take your money and move on.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. Sigifredo Sarabia, thanks for your question as well. They said, Mark, are aliens Christians or a god for you or Dennis?
Well, for me, because it was put towards me, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I have no doubt. So if you came to me right now and said, Mark, we'll give you $1 million, provided that you say that there is alien life in the universe, I would take that bet tonight. I really do believe that there is alien life. Let's separate our word from alien, because that assumes that we are the basis of life. I believe there is life in the universe, and I don't think Dennis would deny that. I don't think Dennis would take the same
I don't.
bet.
Dennis doesn't really know, but I can see the possibility.
Right.
And it's the explosion of exoplanets in the last 7-8 years. I mean, there's over 5,000 of them, and we're just scratching the surface. So, when you think of how many galaxies and how many stars in each of these galaxies, and you're going to have a lot of these planets, and it's not that they're all going to be in that so-called habitable zone, but you're going to find some that are going to be ideal for providing those conditions. Would I be surprised? No, I would not be surprised. But like I mentioned, if there is this life, I'd love to talk to their theologians and their philosophers. I mean, I would be really fascinated. But maybe that's what heaven is.
Again, atheists out there, we are tonight. We are on the precipice of a new movement. This is an honest believer, and you got to appreciate that. He thinks as well as we do. There is probably life out there. We don't know how to explain it. We don't know where it fits. None of us have the answers. Let's just leave it at that.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. Appreciate your super chat as well from Sentinel Apologetics. Is that Mark, sentient alien life confirms the theology of early Christianity, the quote principle of plenitude, unquote, Otherwise, no alien life makes us more special. In other words, I think they're saying, like, if there are no aliens, then it just makes our life even more special.
Well, the first thing we'd have to prove is that there's no aliens. And like I said, the chances of there not being aliens are really not in our favor. Whatever point they have achieved, I know you hear young Earth creationists, they'll talk about how we have sent out, through the SETI program, that we haven't heard anything back. People really need to understand what we're talking about. The speed of light is 186,000 miles per second, 8 times around the equator of the Earth. At that speed, since we have been sending out radio waves, we have gotten nowhere. We've made it 100 light years. We are talking about a universe that's 13 billion light years across. We would not expect to hear anything, and we would not expect to have them hear from us. You cannot imagine the size of this universe.
Yeah.
And Denis, I am on the eastern side of this continent. Stop yawning.
Yeah, but it's because I'm old. I'm past my bedtime.
51 years old here, Denis.
Yeah,
After
well,
midnight for us.
you're just a young buck. I'm a senior citizen.
Keep it going. It's time for Denis. It's time for James to make his money. Keep going, James.
Let's see. Stupid Whore Energy. She says, Mark, have you ever seen the documentary Grizzly Man?
Yes, I have. Very, very unbelievable. Bart, he ended up dying of cancer. I was in tears at the end. We love our animals, and I gotta be honest with you. The apex predators, they'll send a shiver down your spine. These are special animals.
Yeah.
And standing in their presence, and I'm sure that Tammy, as a Christian, will agree with me. It is hard to stand in front of a tiger or a lion or a grizzly bear and feel superior. We have the minds, we have the ability to think, but man, these animals are incredible. With one swipe of the paw, they could kill us. So yes, super whore energy. I need another question. Put one more through at $1.
Gotcha. Sentinel Apologetics, thanks for your other super chat. They said we're only got 1, 2, 3, about 4 more left, so we're gonna let you guys go to sleep. They said, Mark, ultimately evolution as a model of reality confirms the theology of the cross. In John 1:14, the Logos incarnates into the universe, an evolved stardust body, in order to give it divine glory.
I think Denis will agree with me. These are words. These are words of ancient man, and I respect the words of ancient man. Don't get me wrong. I was not there 2,000 years ago, 2,020 years ago, to tell you whether or not Jesus walked the face of the earth. This is something I cannot say with certainty. Do I think Jesus exists? No. Do I think God exists? No. That is what makes me an atheist. But at the end of the day, do I know it? Honestly, I don't. So, Denis, back me on this.
Well, no, I can't back you on that. There was a historical Jesus. I mean, there really was a guy who walks the streets, and if you look at the Gospels, everything will line up with that period of the first century. Now, whether he was the Son of God or whether he literally rose from the dead, those are open and debatable questions. But as far as his historicity, and I hear this often, especially in atheistic circles. I mean, those scholars who hold that view are on the edge. They're on the fringe of scholarship. So the vast majority of New Testament scholars, of historians of that period, would say, yeah, there was someone named Jesus during that time. The other thing about the Gospels, there's a lot of historical reference, Gospel of Luke in particular, of people, times, and dates, and these all line up with extra biblical materials that we have. But the real question is, who was he, and did he literally rise from the dead? Now, I will say, I think he's the Son of God. I think he rose from the dead. That's foundational in my faith. And the moment I step away from those, I no longer will call myself a Christian. But yeah, I mean, it's, I've heard those comments before, and I almost ignore them because it's not worth interacting. Because, for example, I'm within the academy. I mean, ask people within the academy. And look, we got atheists who are New Testament guys, and they won't deny the historicity of Jesus. They'll definitely say he ain't the Son of God. He was just another Jewish guy. He ran a cult, and this cult went crazy, and this is what we have for Christianity. But you see, there's still that historical reference that is there. So
you got it. Thanks so much. And thanks so much for your question, 32. I don't know if I'm saying that right. They said, if God doesn't exist, who pops up the next Kleenex? Thank you very much. Never thought about that. Stupid whore energy, as she likes to be called, said, listen, Denis, there is such a thing biochemically irrelevant activity. Very sassy tonight.
What's the point?
I don't know. To be honest, I honestly, I don't get if I ever put, like, when I'm on other channels and I put forth a super chat, I'm always like really careful. No, yeah, sorry, but yes, I think there's a missing word, but she says, listen, Denis, I think she's saying there is such a thing as biochemically irrelevant activity.
Well, okay, yeah, all right, fair enough. Is there randomness in nature? Absolutely. Let's take radiometric dating. That's random, the way radiometric materials break down.
Gotcha. Thanks so much.
So my take on that, James, let me take a shot at that. So I've heard this, and Whore Energy and I really align well. I have heard her on, I think it's her, on many debates. Yes. Do we see anything that would make us believe that there is a reason that the supernatural exists? And that is where I'm still really having troubles.
Gotcha. Thanks so much.
Supernatural exists right beside you on your left.
Gotcha.
My dog?
Next up, Serious Startups. Thanks for your super chat. They said evolution of DNA genes via quote unquote chance is completely impossible because they're quote unquote neutral chemically. So how do you believe it could occur via chance?
Well, that's more for me because Denis, well, actually it's for both of us. We both believe in evolution. So yes, this is how it happens. You have genes, then you have alleles. Alleles will always choose for the dominant feature. For example, blue eyes, brown eyes will always be the dominant when it comes to two people getting together, one with blue eyes, one with brown. You will get brown eyes. It's really a hard argument when you start to get into the biology, the transmission of genes, the alleles of the genes. You really got to study this stuff, and it's not an hour-long study. I think Denis, being more studied in this, will agree with me. It takes years to understand this.
Yeah, and look, at trying to answer a question like that in 2 minutes, that's just insults the discussion of the debate.
It's very deep, people. Like, to just understand how genes work, and then the alleles of the genes, and then the dominant traits. Honestly, these are year-long courses in universities. These are not things that are just talking points. They are very complex, and I don't understand them, and I've spent years trying to understand them. There's a lot to learn.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. Appreciate your super chat. Brother John, they said, Dennis and Tammy, it's highly mathematically probable there is intelligent life elsewhere. Does that mean Jesus has to die on every planet to save them?
Good question.
Great question. And no idea. And that's where I made the comment. If there is extraterrestrial life, I want to find out who their philosophers are and their theologians. And, was there a Christ-like figure that dominated religions on those planets? I don't know. I mean, this is just open-ended.
Gotcha.
And I don't know either.
Thank you very much.
And from my side, I think Denis and Tammy and even James, I know James is a believer. We've got a lot to learn. We're 100 years into this very complex discussion. Don't anyone stop at this point and say, we know it all. As an atheist, I will tell you, we don't know it all. I talk to them all. Can we, as atheists, say that we don't believe there's a God? Of course, we are saying there's not enough evidence for a God. That does not mean that we know it all.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. Next up, last one. Appreciate your question. Stupid whore energy, or now we'll call her super whore energy. She says, what do you think that we can delete 50% of a mouse genome with no effect? I think she meant, why do you think that we can delete 50% of a mouse genome with no effect?
Oh, because you got a lot of redundant genes.
That's a study that just came out. They eliminated a lot of what they considered the junk DNA, and that's what I alluded to earlier. Is I said a lot of our DNA is considered junk DNA. So they did a test on a mouse, and they got rid of it. It's actually more than 50%. They left 30% of the DNA, and it had no ill effects on the mouse. So again, this kind of backs my belief that there is a lot of junk DNA, and we know there is. That's what a lot of the retroviruses are. We know there's a lot of insertions into our DNA that aren't relative. Yeah, it's hard to explain, and we don't know where it falls. But Denis, take it away.
Well, no, there's a lot of redundancies going on in genes. Take the Hox genes. I mean, you got a series of 4, and these are duplicates. I mean, and this is the advantage of duplication, is the general gene will operate, but that gives you 3 other genes of the same type go and evolve in whatever direction. So people start wondering, where do the information come from? They come from the redundancies. So that doesn't surprise me that, such an experiment emerge that way.
But again, and it's not an atheist belief, and it's not a theist belief. The Hox genes and the retroviruses really do prove evolution.
Oh yeah,
there's really at the end of the night, I think Denis and I need to stand together, put our arms over each other's shoulders, and say, look, people, evolution is real. There's a lot of proof for it, and for example, the retroviruses, they really do close the case on this.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Agreed.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. So we will next say goodbye, as this has been an excellent conversation. Definitely getting to, if you haven't seen already, folks, both Denis and Mark. Very personable, very genuine, and so really enjoyable. And Tammy, so much. I appreciate it so much. This is the first time we've gotten to get to know you, and I can tell you folks, obviously you can tell Tammy as well, very personable, down to earth. And so all three of you, thank you very much for being on with us. It's been a true pleasure.
Yeah, it's been great fun. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Tammy. Thanks, James.
You bet.
Yeah, and on our side, James, all we can say is everybody, we are all on this little ball of dust together. We need to get along, and we're just looking for truth. Let's figure this out. If there's a God, let's figure it out. If there isn't a God, let's figure it out. Let's stop fighting, people. We need to figure this out. We are honestly at a stage where we are pushing extinction to the point that is unbelievable. We are killing animals to the point of it that's unbelievable. In the last 80 years, we have burnt 3.5 billion years of biomass. We got to think this stuff through, and we need to come together, and we need to figure this out.
And like the song says, all you need is love. And I think that's really true. With love, I think it'll all work out.
There you go.
Great way to end.
Gotcha.
Anyway,
All
thanks,
you
guys.
need is love.
Oh,
Come on,
sing.
Denis, join in.
Don't sing. You hurt my ears.
Thanks.
All right, see you guys.
Thanks so
All right.
much.
Thanks,
Thank
Denis.
you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
James.
Take
Take
care.
care.
Have a great night.
Bye.
Good night.